Have you ever wished that just one story could calm your mind? Like the surface of a lake becoming perfectly still? Tonight, you will hear stories that have existed for hundreds of years, stories that, in the old days, were so profound that even kings and emperors would willingly leave their thrones just to uncover the deeper meaning hidden inside. These are not stories meant for you to understand right away. They are thousand-year-old remedies, passed down through generations of Zen masters, meant for those who feel weary and are searching for a place where their minds can finally rest. Here, there are no lectures, no debates, nothing you need to prove, only a slow, steady voice telling stories, and a journey that will take you from the noise of the outside world, back to the stillness that has always been within you. If you are sitting right now, let your back be straight, but without tension. If you are lying down, let your body sink in, as if the earth is gently holding you. Take a deep breath, and know, you do not need to go anywhere at all. This 4-hour journey begins now, a passage through Zen stories, so that you will not just listen, but also feel, and perhaps discover something you have been searching for all along. Once, in Japan, when the dusty red roads still carried the footprints of samurai and temples hid behind golden maple trees, there lived a Zen master named Nan. His home was a humble wooden house, where sliding doors opened to a gentle fragrance of tea drifting through the room. One autumn afternoon, under a pale gray sky with slow-moving clouds, a university professor came to visit him. The professor carried with him a treasury of fresh Western knowledge, grand theories, meticulous analyses of consciousness, and philosophical concepts polished by years of study. From the moment he stepped inside, he began speaking quickly, without pause, afraid, perhaps, that if he stayed silent for even a second, his thoughts would slip away. He spoke of his research, of how science could explain the nature of the mind, of conclusions he was certain he had mastered. Nan listened, his eyes gentle and calm, like water without a ripple. His hands moved slowly as he prepared tea, scooping leaves from a wooden box, pouring boiling water, lifting the teapot high and tilting it slightly so the clear golden liquid flowed into a porcelain cup. When the cup was full, he kept pouring. Tea spilled over the rim, ran across the table, and dripped onto the wooden floor. The professor could not hold back any longer and blurted out that the cup was already full, and no more could be added. Nan set the teapot down, looked at him with an expression both serious and kind, and said slowly that, just like this cup, the professor was already full of his own opinions and theories. How could he be shown Zen if he did not first empty his cup? Those words were not loud, yet they rang out with the weight of a temple bell echoing in the morning air, stopping the listener mid-thought. In that pause, an empty space quietly opened, a space wide enough for something new to step in. Zen calls this beginner's mind. It is not the emptiness of ignorance, but the openness of untouched soil, ready to receive any seed that might take root. In daily life, we often carry a cup already overflowing with, I know, I understand, and I am right. Because of that, there is no room for anything new. As we grow older, we become skilled at building walls from past experience and old beliefs, forgetting that on the other side of those walls, the world is still changing every hour. Emptying the cup does not mean abandoning everything we have learned. It means loosening our grip just enough so that new things can enter and blend in, so that we do not become prisoners of our own conclusions. When we enter a conversation or an experience with a beginner's mind, we feel lighter, more curious, and closer to truth, because nothing is already labeled. Nothing is locked into old patterns. And perhaps, to begin the journey ahead, the first thing we need is not another piece of knowledge, but the letting go of a piece of judgment, so that our minds become like an untouched morning field, where any seed has the chance to grow. Emptying our own cup may sound simple, yet it is one of the greatest challenges for most of us. Our habit of clinging to what is familiar is deeply rooted. We try to protect what we believe is true, as if losing it means losing ourselves. But the truth is, we are not our thoughts or opinions. They are just clouds drifting across the sky of awareness. And that sky is always wider than any cloud, able to embrace every shape and color, whether dark as storm or pure as snow. So when Nan told the professor to empty his cup, what he meant was to realize that we are not limited by what we currently hold, that we can set down, even just for a moment, all our theories, logic, and experience, and stand before reality as if seeing it for the first time. Only in that moment do the doors truly open. In today's world, a beginner's mind is just as precious. Each day, we face an overwhelming flood of information, heated debates, and declarations made with absolute certainty. It is easy to believe we already know enough, already understand everything, and unconsciously shut ourselves off from other possibilities. But if we allow ourselves to enter a conversation, a task, or a relationship with the mindset of not yet knowing, we will be surprised at what we discover: new angles, unseen details, even in things we thought we had known for decades. Letting go here does not mean denying the value of wisdom or experience. It means not letting them become walls that block us from the flow of life. Life is like a river that is always changing. And if we cling to a bucket of water we scooped yesterday, we will never taste the freshness of the water today. Beginner's mind is not about lacking. It is a different kind of abundance. It is the richness of someone willing to welcome whatever comes, without fear of losing themselves, and without rushing to frame it into a fixed concept. When we understand this, we realize that peace does not come from piling on more and more things, but from stepping out of the weight we already carry, allowing ourselves to be lighter, more open, like a garden that can only welcome new shoots if the gardener is willing to cut away the dry branches. And so, the rest of our journey tonight will be the same. The more we can let go, the deeper we can go into the stories. We will no longer hear them as distant tales from long ago, but as if we are sitting right there beside the people in them, breathing with them, and allowing the lessons to quietly settle into us without needing to grasp them too tightly. When we truly enter the state of beginner's mind, we begin to notice something that seems simple, yet we rarely accept it: that reality has never once repeated itself. Every moment we are living is entirely new. Even if we are looking at the same row of trees along a familiar street, the rustle of today's wind through the leaves will never be the same as yesterday's. The light filtering through the branches has never once held exactly the same color or shape twice. Yet most of us live as if everything has already been defined, named, and known. This habit of labeling robs us of the freshness of the world. We no longer see it as it is. only the shadow of the memory we have attached to it. Beginner's mind is the way we peel away those labels, stepping into each situation as if for the very first time, seeing a loved one not through the lens of the past, but as though we are meeting them right now, listening to a story not to compare it with what we already know, but to truly hear what it is saying. And strangely, when we do this, everything comes alive, as though a thin veil has been lifted from our eyes. The world suddenly appears brighter, closer, and full of details we once overlooked. In Zen practice, this matters because it not only opens the path of learning, but it is also the key to resting deeply. When the mind is no longer packed with old judgments and reflexive reactions, it becomes as light as a still lake, able to reflect anything placed before it with clarity, without distortion or coloring. If we look closely, we will see that in this state, our natural wisdom begins to operate. Decisions become clearer without the struggle of overthinking. Emotions become fewer because they are no longer tangled in the stories we tell ourselves. From there, our actions naturally become simpler, more fitting, like the effortless response of life itself. This is why emptying our cup is not just a small step of preparation, it is the foundation of the entire journey. And just like the professor long ago, only when we stop pouring out everything we think is important can we truly listen, truly see, and truly learn what life, or a long evening filled with stories like tonight, is ready to give us. When we begin to feel that inner space, the space we once feared because we mistook it for emptiness, we realize it is not cold or lacking at all. Instead, it is like a sky opening after a rainstorm, sunlight flooding in, everything washed clean, fresh, and pure. It is a space where wisdom and creativity can breathe, where the deepest insights often appear with lightness and ease. From that space, we begin to look at ourselves differently. We see how many times we have reacted too quickly simply because we thought we already knew someone or something. We see how many chances to learn or connect have passed us by because we gave them no place to land. Slowly, we come to understand that beginner's mind is not only for monks or spiritual seekers. It is for anyone who wants to live with more awareness and depth. A father may need beginner's mind to hear his child's story without imposing his parenting experience onto every word. A friend may need beginner's mind to understand that the person they know today is not the same as the one they knew years ago. A leader may need beginner's mind to avoid dismissing an employee's idea simply because it differs from the usual way of doing things. And in those moments, we see that letting go of preconceived notions does not make us weaker or less in control. It gives us the ability to respond more wisely and appropriately to the reality in front of us. Just as Nan-in did not argue with the professor to defend a viewpoint, he simply created an experience powerful enough for the man to realize he needed to let go. That is a kind of wisdom words can hardly convey. It can only be felt when the mind is empty enough to receive it. And when we let that story sink into us, like the warmth of tea spreading through the body, we will see that the road ahead, whether long or short, will carry far less resistance and judgment. So that each story, each image, each breath becomes a doorway to something never known before. When we touch that openness, we discover something else. The world around us seems to change as well, not because it truly transforms instantly, but because our way of seeing has shifted. People we once found difficult may suddenly seem less sharp-edged. because we no longer approach them with defensiveness or the urge to counter them. Work that once felt dull may reveal small details worth exploring, as though we are doing it for the first time. Even problems that used to keep us awake at night may feel lighter, because in beginner's mind, they are no longer wrapped in the labels of danger, hopeless, or unsolvable. They are simply situations unfolding, like clouds passing across the sky. Without clouds, the sky is still there. When clouds drift away, the sky remains unchanged. In this state, we no longer rush to write a complete story about events. We no longer strain to find an immediate solution. Instead, we give things time to reveal their true nature. Often, answers appear when we least expect them, like a drop of dew quietly forming on a leaf at dawn. That is why beginner's mind is called the doorway to wisdom. It opens space for the wisdom already within us to breathe and move. Instead of being suffocated by the false certainty of what we think we know. And so, emptying the cup is not about erasing ourselves. It is about setting down the heavy burden of, I know, so that we can return to the raw aliveness of each moment. Where everything is new, where everything is a first time, where every instant is a chance to see more deeply, feel more deeply, and live more fully. When we hold that state long enough, we notice a quiet but powerful shift within us, like opening a window in a dark room and letting sunlight flood in. Not because someone brought us something new, but because we finally removed the curtains we had hung ourselves. Situations that once made us angry now become opportunities to observe our own reactions. Words that once wounded us now feel like distant echoes, no longer strong enough to pierce the depths of our mind. We begin to see the difference between knowing and understanding, between information and wisdom. Information can fill the cup quickly, but wisdom only comes when the cup is emptied and rinsed clean, so that whatever is poured in keeps its original flavor. In this space, even silence becomes rich. It is no longer an uncomfortable emptiness, but a fertile ground where perceptions, ideas, and emotions can appear and fade naturally, without being trapped or forced. When we live with beginner's mind, every experience, whether it is a morning making tea, a short conversation, or a long journey, can become a lesson, a moment of awakening. We no longer approach them with a clenched fist, but with an open hand, ready to receive and ready to let go. Like a Zen master pouring tea, not to fill the cup, but because each drop is part of the living ritual itself. And in that very letting go lies the first step on every path that leads to peace. As we go deeper into this experience, we gradually realize that beginner's mind is not just a temporary state to prepare for learning or receiving something new. It can become a way of living. A quiet foundation supporting every thought, word, and action. From here, situations in which we once reacted with old habits begin to unfold differently, not because the world has become less challenging, but because we no longer rush to force everything into a predetermined story. We no longer immediately trigger the defense or attack mechanisms whenever we feel challenged. Instead, we learn to pause, observe, and allow things to fully reveal their true shape before we respond. And it is in that pause that wisdom has the chance to step in, where wiser choices can be born, just as an empty cup can hold any water the host wishes to offer. An open mind can receive whatever experiences life brings, joy or sorrow, success or failure. And because it is no longer crammed with rigid definitions, it can fully taste the flavor of each experience without being swept away or trapped. At this point, we begin to see more clearly that real strength does not lie in tightly holding onto what we know, but in the ability to let go and welcome what is arriving, not in a hollow, meaningless emptiness, but in a vibrant openness where every moment can be a new beginning. Like a traveler unburdened by heavy luggage, we can move forward with lightness, curiosity, and gratitude for whatever is here now. Then we discover that this lightness is something we had unknowingly left behind in the years we spent accumulating, packing our cup with layer upon layer of knowledge, experience, viewpoints, and beliefs. We had forgotten the feeling of sitting still without having to defend or prove anything. We had forgotten the natural safety that comes from not being defined by what we carry in our minds. When we begin to live with beginner's mind, those heavy layers start to fall away, not with a harsh tug, but as naturally as a leaf detaching from its branch when autumn comes. Gentle and in its own time, conversations begin to change because we are no longer listening to find an opportunity to respond, but listening to truly understand. New experiences feel less intimidating because we are no longer comparing them to old patterns. Even the silences between ourselves and others feel richer, because they are no longer filled with hurried thoughts. We begin to understand more deeply what Nan wished to show the professor, that an empty cup is not a sign of lacking, but an invitation for life to pour in. Sometimes the most valuable thing we can carry on this journey is not what we have already accumulated, but the space inside us for anything to enter and transform us. And from that space, the rest of tonight's journey will unfold, like a door just opening, leading us to other stories, other lessons, yet all beginning from one very simple place, the place of a mind willing to say, "I do not know yet, but I am ready to listen." When we can truly say, "I do not know yet, but I am ready to listen," from deep within, not as a polite formality, but as a sincere state of the heart, something about the way we show up to the world changes immediately. Our eyes become softer, our breathing slower and deeper, our steps lighter, and those around us, whether they realize it or not, will also feel that change. An open mind always creates a safe space for others, helping them lower their defenses, ease their tension, and loosen their need to guard their own opinions. In that space, an exchange becomes a meeting, and understanding becomes empathy, like a river freed from a dam, flowing naturally and carrying its cool freshness wherever it goes. And just like that river, beginner's mind does not choose or discriminate. It receives everything with the same curiosity and respect. Over time, that very receptiveness becomes nourishment for wisdom and compassion, two qualities without which all other knowledge becomes dry and narrow. This is why, in Zen, returning to beginner's mind is not seen as a temporary starting point, but as a lifelong practice. The world will always change. People will always be complex. We will always face things we have never known before. And only when the cup within us still has space can we continue to learn, to love, and to grow without being trapped in old stories. One day, when we look back, we will see that everything most profound we have ever learned began the moment we dared to put aside what we knew and allowed ourselves to be fully present as someone completely new. There is a kind of strength that people often underestimate, the strength of a non-judgmental presence. It is a strength that needs no preaching, no lists of do's and don'ts. It only requires being there, fully, calmly, and ready to offer someone a safe space in which they can see themselves. This is at the heart of the story of Gudo, a Zen master who once taught the emperor, yet often chose to live like a wandering beggar in remote villages. One stormy night, he came to a small house seeking shelter. Inside, he found a family drowning in misery. The husband was lost to gambling and drinking, violent when he won, borrowing and abandoning his wife and children when he lost. Gudo did not scold him. He did not try to teach the man through the wife's complaints. Instead, he quietly gave the wife money, telling her to buy good wine and food, and then told the family to rest while he sat and waited. Around midnight, the husband staggered home, drunk and defeated. Instead of hearing the criticism he surely expected, he was met with a gentle voice inviting him to eat and drink the fine wine that had just been bought. In that haze, Gudo sat beside him, silent and steady as a warm stone, keeping watch all night. The next morning, when the man sobered up and learned that the person who had stayed by his side was the emperor's own teacher, it was as if a mirror had been placed before his soul, showing him the smallness of his own life without anyone needing to point it out. When Gudo simply said that life is short, and that if he continued living this way, there would be no time left for anything of value, the man broke down in tears and asked to follow him, not because he was forced, but because, for the first time, someone had accepted him even at his worst. This is how unconditional compassion works. It does not try to change someone, but it is precisely that complete acceptance that opens the door for change to happen on its own. For it is only when a person no longer feels judged that they can find the courage to face their own truth. And in that moment, the seed of a new path begins to sprout. There is also another form of stillness, deeper than patience and wider than tolerance. The ability to stand unmoved in the storm of both praise and blame, without letting either extreme sweep you away. This is shown most clearly in the story of Hakuin, a Zen master who lived simply in a small village, respected by all for his wisdom and humility, until one day, a rumor spread that he was the father of a child a young village woman was carrying. When her parents, filled with rage and shame, came to confront him, Hakuin simply replied, "Is that so? No defense? No denial." When the baby was born, they brought the child to him, declaring, "This is your responsibility." Hakuin quietly took the baby in, cared for it as his own, buying milk, washing diapers, staying up through the night, while his reputation crumbled. His students left, and the villagers avoided him. A year later, unable to bear the lie any longer, the young woman confessed that the father was actually a fisherman. Her parents returned to apologize and ask for their grandchild back. Hakuin said the same 3 words, "Is that so?" and handed the baby over without the slightest bitterness. In him, unconditional compassion was not just the willingness to hold an innocent life. It was the ability to let everything come and go without clinging to role, reputation, or credit. He was like a silent riverbank, letting the water flow by, whether it carried mud or moonlight. It was all the same, neither adding nor taking away. The lesson here is that when we stop resisting what is happening, even when it is against our wishes or our sense of justice, we find that real strength lies in unwavering steadiness. in the ability to let life flow through us without breaking our inner peace. Placing these two stories side by side, we see a quiet but powerful truth. Neither Gudo nor Hikuin tried to fix anyone with lectures or force. They did not attempt to mold others into a certain shape. They simply met each person fully where they were, allowing them, when reflected in the mirror of acceptance, to see for themselves the gap between their reality and their potential. This is compassion without measurement, without condition, without deadlines for change. It does not measure its worth by results. It comes not from a need to control, but from understanding that everyone has their own ripening moment for awakening. In modern life, this may seem to contradict our instinct to act now, especially when we see someone harming themselves or others. But in the moment we dare to stop interfering, and instead stay present with clarity and care, a special kind of space opens. In that space, the other person is not forced to defend their ego. They are not pushed into shame or resistance. And just like a seed placed in moist soil, change can begin to grow from within, slowly but steadily. When it happens, it is not the product of outside pressure, but of genuine transformation, one that lasts because it was chosen from within. This is the gift of unconditional compassion. It does not promise to fix the problem right away, but it ensures that when the person is ready to turn the page, they will remember the moment they were accepted completely, and use it as their anchor to start again. That is why unconditional compassion is never weakness or surrender. It is a soft but enduring strength, like water that seems fragile against rock but, over time, wears it smooth, carves it deep, and shapes wide valleys. It does not push to win, nor compete to dominate, yet it can change what seems unchangeable. Because it does not aim to change someone for the sake of our own ego. It instead gives them an experience unlike anything they have known before, one where they are not condemned, not threatened, not conditioned, and it is precisely that safety that allows them to be honest with themselves. This is why the drunken gambler followed Gudo after a single night, and why Hikuin could return the child without a trace of resentment, because, for them, the outcome was less important than keeping their clarity and openness intact through the whole process. Applied to our own lives, this means that sometimes the way to help someone change is not to grab their hand and pull them toward us, but to stand still in a place that is bright enough and calm enough for them to see, and to know that when they choose to turn back or step forward, there will always be such a space waiting for them. A space with no judgment, no closed doors, no demand to prove anything. That is the gift of unconditional compassion, an invisible gift strong enough to help someone walk out of their own darkness. And one that, when given, leaves our own hearts lighter and freer than ever before. When we truly understand the essence of unconditional compassion, we see that it is not only about how we treat others when they are lost. It is also about how we learn to treat ourselves in moments of weakness, mistakes, or confusion, just like the drunken husband or Hikuin when he was falsely accused. We too have moments when we are caught inside our own worst stories, judging ourselves, passing harsh sentences on ourselves that no one else imposed. If, in those moments, we try to fix ourselves only with rigid discipline or self-criticism, we end up closing the door to change even tighter. But if we can sit down with ourselves the way Gudo sat with that man, not dismissing, not ignoring, but also not condemning, Then we create the space to understand the deeper cause of our suffering. We may see that, sometimes, misguided actions are simply the result of a fear or an emptiness that has not yet been filled. When we understand that, we can choose differently without forcing ourselves through sheer willpower. Unconditional compassion toward ourselves is not about excusing or indulging our faults. It is about acknowledging where we are and allowing ourselves the chance to move forward. It is like Hakuin handing back the child with the words, "Is that so?" A gesture that is both letting go and opening up. So as not to be trapped in a fixed story about oneself. When we can do this, our relationship with ourselves becomes lighter. And naturally, our relationships with others grow warmer and more genuine, because we no longer meet them as the fixer, but as the companion. And it is that companionship that becomes the most fertile soil for real change. When we cultivate this ability to accompany rather than control, we notice a subtle yet clear shift in how we show up in life. We no longer rush to interrupt a story just to correct it. We no longer jump to give advice the moment someone shares their pain. We no longer try to become the savior so we can be recognized or thanked. Instead, we learn to sit, to listen, and to let the other person feel that they are seen, heard, and accepted exactly as they are. This kind of presence lets others breathe more deeply, release their guard, and open their hearts. And in that moment, the seed of healing is planted, not loudly, not instantly visible, but quietly taking root and growing over time. Along the way, we also realize that unconditional compassion does not mean always agreeing or yielding. Sometimes it includes setting clear boundaries to protect both sides, like a garden fence. Not to shut life out, but to ensure what is inside can grow safely. That is why unconditional compassion cannot be separated from wisdom. Without wisdom, kindness can become indulgence. Without kindness, wisdom can turn cold. Only when they walk together can we truly stay beside someone without being pulled into the storm of their problems, while still keeping the clarity to know when to stay silent, when to speak, when to embrace, and when to step back and let them walk on their own. This is a life art that Gudo and Hakuin embodied fully, and it is also an invitation for us to practice every day. Beginning with small moments that are enough to change the quality of our relationships. With enough practice, we find that unconditional compassion is no longer an action we try to perform. It becomes a natural state of presence, like breathing in and out without needing reminders. Like morning light slipping through the window without needing to be called. It exists not because we strain to hold it, but because the resistance and calculation inside us have slowly dissolved. At that point, when someone comes to us in weakness or chaos, we no longer see them through the lens of right or wrong, good or bad. We simply see a human being moving through a turn in their life, just as we have done before. Seeing them this way, we lose the urge to change them to make ourselves feel safe or to affirm our own role. Instead, we simply want to hold a space wide enough, calm enough, for them to pause, to listen to themselves, and to find their own way. This does not mean standing apart from life or ignoring what happens. It means learning to move with the flow of life without muddying it, like a swimmer moving with the current without stirring the silt at the bottom. And it is this clear presence that inspires others to change, not because they are pushed, but because they have tasted the safety and freedom of being with us. and they realize they can bring that same quality into their own lives. At that point, unconditional compassion is no longer a distant ideal. It becomes part of our breath, our gaze, and every gesture we offer each day. When it becomes that natural, we see it spread beyond the circle of our closest relationships, reaching even those we meet only briefly, or even those who have hurt us. For when our mind is no longer imprisoned by old stories, we no longer feel the need to defend or protect our image before them, nor the urge to prove who is right or wrong. Instead, we can see them as human beings wrestling with their own darkness, just as we have wrestled with ours. And it is this kind of seeing, without judgment, without belittling, without idolizing, that is perhaps the deepest gift we can offer. It allows the other person to exist whole, not turned into the villain for us to reject, nor the pitiful one for us to rescue. In that moment, the line between us and them fades. We begin to feel that their pain, their joy, their confusion, and their awakening all have reflections within us. From here, every time we choose to listen instead of react, to wait instead of impose, to stay instead of turn away, we quietly nurture a new current in the relationship, the current of trust. And once trust is planted, it will find a way to grow, even if the surrounding conditions have yet to change. That is the soil on which all lasting transformation is built. And it is also the quiet yet enduring legacy that any of us can leave for this world. When we have lived in this current long enough, our presence becomes a kind of unspoken language that others can still feel, a quiet energy that softens conversations, cools down conflicts, and loosens fears even before they can be put into words. This is not influence in the sense of actively shaping someone. It is a natural radiance, like the fragrance of a flower that does not try to attract bees and butterflies, yet still draws them in, or like the moon that never chases the river, yet still lights up its surface. In the space where unconditional compassion is present, people can risk speaking their truth without fear of ridicule. They can reveal their vulnerabilities without fear of exploitation. They can admit their mistakes without being permanently defined by them. This not only changes how they see themselves, but also how they step into the world. Once they have felt that kind of safety, they naturally want to pass it on to others, creating a widening circle of kindness that we cannot measure. On a deeper level, we begin to see that this is no longer simply acting kindly or being nice, but living in a state of awareness where the distinction between giver and receiver dissolves, and both are nourished in the very moment of presence. At that point, unconditional compassion is no longer just a moral quality, it becomes the natural fabric of all connection. The deep absorption of unconditional compassion also helps us re-examine what we once thought were our unshakable limits. We realize that most of them are walls built from fear and pain, reinforced over the years by memory and prejudice. When we meet others from this place of openness, we start to see that even the behaviors that most irritate us often come from anxiety, a lack of something essential, or an unhealed wound. And when we see that root, our anger begins to fade, replaced by empathy. This does not mean condoning harmful behavior or allowing it to continue. It means we know how to respond with steadiness and clarity, neither letting emotions dictate every decision, nor letting compassion turn into blind self-sacrifice. Here is where wisdom and compassion meet. forming a strength that is both gentle and unshakable. It can set necessary boundaries without slamming the door of connection. It can say no without damaging the dignity of the one who hears it. When we practice this long enough, we find that every relationship, whether easy or difficult, becomes an opportunity to refine this quality, to test our patience, and to confirm that unconditional compassion is not just a beautiful idea, but a truly livable path that nourishes both ourselves and others. Once this quality becomes inseparable from the way we live, situations that once made us lose our temper or react harshly begin to unfold differently, almost as if someone had quietly changed the rhythm of the conversation. Instead of being swept up in the emotional tide of the other person, we can hold an inner stillness, enough to observe not only their words and actions, but also what remains unspoken, fears, insecurities, or exhaustion beneath the surface. In that moment, our response no longer comes from a defensive reflex, but from a genuine desire to understand. And that understanding shapes the quality of our answer, turning it into a bridge rather than a wall. This is what makes unconditional compassion a living form of wisdom. It is not fixed into a formula, but adapts to each situation, each person, each shade of context, like water that can flow as a stream, a river, or as rain, depending on the shape of the vessel that holds it. When we can be this flexible, even relationships once full of conflict have a chance to find balance, not because one side gave in, but because both found a way to coexist without causing each other further harm. The presence of unconditional compassion in our most difficult moments is like a small lantern set in the darkness. It cannot drive away all the night, but it can light enough space for both of us to take one safe step forward. That light does not overwhelm, does not blind, but is steady and patient. And it is that steadiness that builds trust, because the other person knows they do not have to rush to change immediately, before the light goes out. When a person is given both the time and the space to walk through their own darkness, transformation happens more deeply and more lastingly, because it comes from their own choice, not from outside pressure. In this process, we also see that unconditional compassion is not just something we offer to others. It is the ground that keeps our own hearts from hardening in the face of ingratitude, betrayal, or misunderstanding. If our love depends on another person's reaction, then it exists only as a conditional exchange. But when it is nourished from within, it continues to flow even when blocked or rejected, like a stream that still finds its way through cracks in the rock to reach the light. And it is this constancy that allows us to keep a gentle nature without losing our firmness, no matter what changes life brings. There is another aspect of Zen wisdom that many people find hard to accept at first: the truth that everything in life is impermanent. Nothing remains forever in its current form, not even the things we love most or fear most. This awareness may sound pessimistic, but within it lies a great freedom, the freedom from clinging and resisting, the two main sources of human suffering. When we truly see that every moment, whether sweet or bitter, is only a passing wave, we no longer desperately try to hold on or push it away. Instead, we learn to stay and watch, like a person standing on the riverbank watching the water flow, knowing that no wave is permanent and nothing can be held back. This understanding does not make us indifferent, it makes us love more deeply. Because we know that each embrace, each word, Each meeting could be the last. And that awareness makes the present more precious than ever. In daily life, practicing awareness of impermanence does not mean coldly telling ourselves, everything will be lost someday. It means allowing ourselves to be fully present in each moment, free from the pull of the past or the anxiety of the future, so that every experience, however small, becomes a doorway to awakening. When impermanence becomes something we live, not just something we understand, our approach to loss, change, and endings transforms naturally. We no longer see departures as personal injustices or as gaping holes that can never be filled. Instead, we begin to see them as chapters closing to make way for new ones, even if the new chapter is not yet written or clear in shape. This does not mean we do not grieve. The sorrow is still there, but it is no longer a storm that drowns us. It becomes a gentle rain that washes away what is old, allowing us to see more clearly the fragile and beautiful nature of all things. And within that space, gratitude blooms naturally. We realize that to have experienced something, even once, even briefly, is already a gift. That gift does not vanish simply because its outer form has changed or disappeared. Living with impermanence is inseparable from living with gratitude, because both invite us back to the present, where everything is still alive in its unfolding, without needing to be compared to what once was, or feared for what has yet to come. In that place, each breath, each touch, each glance becomes a complete moment, not a means to something else, but the very meaning of life itself. The deep understanding of impermanence opens us to a softer, more flexible way of moving through life's sudden changes. When we no longer believe that everything must be stable in order for us to be at peace, we begin to learn how to find balance in the midst of change. Like a bamboo stalk that does not resist the wind but bends and then returns upright, we learn to adjust to circumstances without losing our inner roots. This not only helps us resist less when facing adversity, but also allows us to see the hidden opportunities in change, possibilities we could not see when we were only focused on keeping everything the same. Practicing in this way also lightens the weight of letting go, because we understand that letting go is not loss, but the opening of space for something new to appear. The end of a relationship can create space for personal growth. The loss of a job can lead to a more fitting path. The departure of an old habit can make room for a healthier way of living. When seen with mindful awareness, impermanence is no longer a threat but a patient teacher, constantly reminding us that each moment is unique and will not return. And so, the best thing we can do is live it fully before it leaves. Recognizing impermanence in all things also stops us from searching for absolute certainty in the outer world. Instead, we turn toward cultivating an inner anchor, one that does not depend on favorable or difficult circumstances, is unmoved by praise or blame, and does not disappear when we lose what we once held most dear. This anchor is not rigid willpower or tight control, but a deep resting place, like a lake that may ripple on the surface but remains still at its depths. Once we have that refuge, we are no longer swept into fear whenever life changes, because we know that everything will pass, and we still have the capacity to be present, to learn, and to love in the midst of change. When we no longer demand that the world remain unchanging for us to feel safe, we become more open to experience. We dare to try new things, step beyond our familiar territory, and accept even the possibility of failure as a natural part of the journey. This is the freedom that only a deep understanding of impermanence can bring. A freedom that does not depend on life unfolding as we wish, but on our ability to stand steady and smile at whatever shape life wears. Living with this understanding, we begin to see that most of our stress and unease do not come from what is happening, but from the fear that it will change or vanish. This keeps us clinging, controlling, or worrying about future scenarios instead of truly living what is here now. But when we accept impermanence as an obvious truth of life, we no longer try to hold on to every moment. We know its value is not in its length but in our fullness of presence. This also means we learn to love without possessing, to care without controlling, and to enjoy without binding ourselves to the outcome. Like admiring a flower without fretting over the day it will fade. We let its fragrance and color soak into our senses right now, knowing that it is its very fragility that makes it beautiful. Practicing in this way frees us from the burden of controlling life, and opens a deep sense of lightness, where each moment is complete in itself, needing no promise of a better tomorrow to make us feel at peace. When such acceptance becomes natural in the way we live, changes that we once saw as losses may reveal themselves as new doors, leading us to experiences we could never reach if everything stayed the same. The closing of a relationship can open space for personal maturity. A missed opportunity can lead to a deeper journey. An unexpected change in circumstances can uncover hidden abilities we did not know we had. This attitude does not make us indifferent to life. It makes us more adaptable, more grateful. Every event, whether welcome or unwelcome, becomes part of the larger picture we are living with. Like an artist creating a mosaic, we do not discard a tile just because its color is darker than the rest, we keep it. Seeing that contrast itself gives depth. When we see life as a work of art being shaped moment by moment, impermanence is no longer a threat. It becomes the rhythm, the breath, and the heartbeat of our journey, where every arrival and every departure adds to the wholeness of our story. Understanding impermanence at this level also reveals that no emotional state or circumstance can fully define who we are. Because everything is moving and changing, even what we thought could never change. This brings a deep relief, because we know that dark days do not last forever. Sorrow does not stay eternally, and even joy and happiness, as precious as they are, will take on new forms. This awareness keeps us from sinking too far into emotional extremes, neither panicking when hardship comes, nor clinging too tightly when happiness visits. Instead, we walk through change with steady footing, like someone who knows the path will have both peaks and valleys. Yet each step can still be grounded and meaningful. Living this way, we no longer search for a permanent safe harbor outside ourselves. We create refuge in each moment, so that even when the wind shifts or the current turns, we still feel the wholeness and completeness of who we are. When we see life through the lens of impermanence, we begin to approach every experience with a gentle curiosity rather than a tense need to control. We know each moment, whether it arrives as joy or as sorrow, will stay only briefly before changing, fading, or making space for something else. It is like the way a meditator sits by a riverbank, watching each wave pass without trying to hold it or push it away, letting the natural rhythm of the flow guide their gaze and breath. This lightness of touch helps us see that most suffering is not in the nature of events themselves, but in the futile effort to fix what cannot be fixed, to force life to remain still so it matches our preferences. Once we understand this, we begin to let go of old calculations. We no longer need to script every situation in advance. We do not panic when plans change. We do not see the departure of a person or an opportunity as the end of happiness. Instead, we learn to let things unfold in their own way, still giving our best in each action, but without tying our hearts to the outcome. When we live with such a spirit, each day becomes a small adventure, where even the unexpected carries a hidden gift, where even a brief encounter can leave a lasting mark, and where we see that the beauty of life is not in how long it lasts, but in how fully we are present while it is here. When we live with a deep, rooted understanding of impermanence, we begin to see that life never moves along a stable, straight line the way we try to imagine it. It is more like a long piece of music, with high notes, low notes, sudden pauses, and even stretches of complete silence. Every event, every change, every departure or arrival of someone in our lives is part of that melody, adding richness, depth, and emotion to the song. When this awareness is lived rather than merely understood intellectually, we no longer react in desperation to change. We know that whatever we are going through is only a passage in the music, and no matter the key it is in, it will keep moving forward. This perspective makes us less obsessed with keeping things the same or restoring them to how they were before, because we see clearly that the nature of life is to keep evolving, shifting shape, opening new possibilities, even when we are not ready to recognize them. This freedom also transforms the way we face what appears to be loss. When a relationship ends, we no longer feel the need to assign blame or cling to memories in order to keep the sense that it still exists. Instead, we can take a deep breath, give thanks for the time we had, and let go gently, allowing both ourselves and the other person to continue on our own paths. When a job slips from our hands, we no longer see it as the end of our worth or ability. We can see it as an invitation to explore a new direction, perhaps a part of ourselves that never had the chance to emerge. When a chapter of life closes, we can step through it with gratitude instead of regret, knowing that its ending is opening another door, perhaps still unseen, but certain to appear. This attitude does not make our emotions shallow, on the contrary, it deepens them, for we no longer fear that loving deeply will make us suffer more when loss comes. We understand that pain is an inseparable part of love, just as darkness is part of light. Accepting both allows our hearts to grow wider, more compassionate. From this place, each present moment becomes a complete gift, needing no perfection to be cherished, no length of time to become meaningful. We can sit with someone for only a few minutes and still feel we have experienced something profound, because in those minutes we are entirely present, not letting the mind drift to the past or rush ahead to the future. When we live this way, impermanence is no longer a threat hanging over us, but a patient teacher, constantly reminding us of the value of presence. This teacher needs no lecture. The passing of seasons, the shifting of rivers, the changing of faces over the years is enough to show us that nothing stays forever. Because of this, each moment now becomes the most precious thing we have. When we realize this, we no longer postpone living. We no longer wait for a better tomorrow to love, to forgive, to begin something we long for. We know tomorrow is never guaranteed. And this moment, with all its imperfections, is the only place we can truly lay our whole heart. This shift in how we live and feel naturally spreads into how we see others. We no longer expect them to stay frozen in the image we are comfortable with. We no longer want them to remain forever in the role or personality we prefer. Because we understand they, too, are in constant transformation, just like us. This acceptance makes it easier to meet change when someone transforms, when a relationship shifts, or when someone once close becomes distant. We know this is not betrayal. It is simply impermanence expressing itself in human form. Instead of trying to pull them back, we can see them off in peace, leaving the door open should our paths cross again one day. What's striking is that when we live in acceptance of impermanence, the simplest moments become far more profound. A humble meal, an afternoon listening to the rain, the long holding of someone's hand. These carry a different quality because we no longer take them for granted. Assuming they will repeat, we know they could vanish at any time, and that fragility makes them even more precious. It is like admiring a flower, knowing it will fade, and letting that awareness draw its scent and color more deeply into us. For this reason, living with impermanence does not make us cold or detached from life. It makes us love life more. Because we see its vivid, beautiful, and fleeting nature. When impermanence becomes a lived truth, not only is our mind freed from the weight of control, but our heart is freed from the fear of loss. We become lighter, yet not shallow, deeper, yet not heavy, peaceful, yet still full of vitality. This is the state Zen calls freedom in the midst of attachment, where we still live among all our relationships, responsibilities, and changes, but are no longer imprisoned by them. Each day, each hour, each minute becomes an open doorway to live more fully, to love more fully, to be more deeply present, because we know that all we now have will one day change. And that is what makes it priceless. When the truth of impermanence has soaked into the way we see life, even the way we walk changes. We no longer move forward like someone racing toward a fixed destination, but like someone traveling a vast road, where every turn, every scene, every patch of sunlight and breath of wind has its own worth. No longer driven by the urge to arrive faster or achieve more. We begin to see that the moments between milestones are the most important ones, because they are where we actually live. Not just wait to live. This does not mean abandoning goals or giving up effort. It means no longer using achievement as the sole measure of value, and no longer trading away the entire present for an uncertain vision of the future. We begin to listen more, not only to others, but to our own inner voice, to the sound of our breathing, to the rustle of leaves outside the window. These small sounds, once lost in the rush, begin to return. This listening turns each day into a vivid experience, even if outwardly it looks ordinary. This awareness also changes how we meet difficulty. Instead of seeing adversity as an enemy to defeat, we begin to view it as a temporary stage in the flow, like dark clouds that cover the sun for a time, but can never erase its light. When we understand this, we no longer feel excessive fear each time life shifts, because we know the nature of all things is to change, which means there will come a time when they pass. This trust does not come from blind hope. but from the repeated experience that no winter has ever lasted forever, and no storm has ever failed to end. That knowledge allows us to stay calm even in moments that seem without escape. Because we know that even pain has its own life cycle. When we truly see the temporary nature of all things, we also become more patient with ourselves and with others. We understand that people do not change according to our wishes, but according to their own rhythm. The best thing we can do is create a space that is safe enough, patient enough, for them to walk their own path. We no longer try to fix others to meet our expectations, because we know that forced intervention usually breeds resistance or pretense. Instead, we allow them to be who they are in each stage of their journey, trusting that, just as spring cannot be forced to arrive sooner, every person needs their own time to bloom in their own way. This patience makes relationships more lasting, because they are built on respect and understanding, not on conditions or pressure. Another profound aspect of living with impermanence is learning to appreciate even the imperfect. When we cling to the idea that happiness exists only when everything is perfect, we easily overlook the beauty right in front of us simply because it does not match our image of how it should be. But when we realize that everything is only here for a while, we begin to see beauty in the unfinished, in the cracks, in the moments that do not go as planned. We see that sometimes the very imperfections create uniqueness and vitality, like a piece of pottery repaired with gold in the art of kintsugi. It is not just restored, it becomes more precious because of the story and the marks of time. With this way of seeing, we no longer waste energy hiding or denying imperfections, but learn to embrace them as a natural part of life. The miracle is that when we live this way, the fear of loss no longer controls our every decision. We can love someone without fearing the day they might leave, because we know that whether they stay or not does not define the worth of the love we give. We can commit ourselves to a new project without being haunted by the possibility of failure, because we understand that success and failure are only passing moments. What remains are the experiences, the growth, and the connections formed along the way. We can watch a sunset without wishing it would last longer, because we know it is its very ending that makes each second so precious. The presence of impermanence in our awareness also deepens our gratitude. Knowing that everything will change means we no longer take things for granted, but treasure them while they are here. The kind words of a friend, the smile of a loved one, the health of our body, a morning without rain, a warm cup of tea. All of these become reasons to be grateful, without needing big things to feel happy. And that gratitude, in turn, nourishes peace, because it keeps us connected to what we have rather than obsessed with what is missing. When we live fully in this spirit, we realize that impermanence is not only a truth about time, but also a reminder of life's constant creativity. Every day, every hour, every minute is a chance for something new to be born, for a part of us to be reborn in awareness, for a relationship to deepen, or for an idea to take shape. Instead of fearing change, we can start to look forward to it, because we know it is the very material that makes our life story unique and unrepeatable. When we live like this, each breath becomes proof of the wonder of being here, right now, in this form and in these circumstances. Even knowing that all of it will one day be different. As we move deeper into the practice of inner contemplation, silence is no longer simply the absence of sound. It becomes a nourishing space where every inner movement can be seen clearly, unclouded by hasty reactions. In this space, we begin to notice the subtle layers of emotion that were once drowned out by the noise of thought, feelings that pass like a light breeze but influence our entire mood. Thoughts that flash and vanish but still leave an echo in how we see the world. By simply sitting still, breathing, and letting everything appear as it is, we gradually learn the art of non-interference, allowing the mind and heart to settle themselves into their natural rhythm. Like a lake returning to stillness after a stone is dropped into it. This does not happen immediately. At first, silence can feel unsettling, like standing in a dark room with nothing to hold on to. But if we patiently remain, we begin to notice that in that darkness, our eyes start to see more clearly, and our mind begins to quiet. This process opens a special doorway to meeting ourselves, not the self defined by social roles, titles, or the image others see, but the deepest, quietest part that is untouched by praise or criticism, winning or losing, comparison or judgment. This part has always been there, but is often covered by the noise of life and the layers of identity we unconsciously put on. When we touch this stillness, we realize we do not have to do anything to deserve our own existence. We do not have to prove our worth or try to become the version someone else expects. This is the state many Zen masters call coming home, not to a place outside, but to the original mind where we feel safe simply because we are truly here. This groundedness gradually changes how we respond to the world's turbulence. Once familiar with stillness, we are less likely to be swept away by collective emotional waves. We no longer rush to react just because a situation demands it. We can breathe slowly, observe, and choose the response that best fits. This does not mean becoming cold or detached. It means acting from a steadier foundation, not being dragged along by every impulse. A criticism, bad news, or unexpected event may still affect us, but instead of exploding or shutting down, we have enough inner space to recognize our emotions, to know we are hurt or anxious, and to find a response that both preserves our own integrity and avoids causing unnecessary harm to others. When stillness becomes part of our life, our relationships naturally change. We begin to listen more deeply, not just to the words others speak, but to what they do not say, the pauses, the subtle changes in their eyes or tone. This listening is not for analysis or judgment, but to be fully present with the other person, giving them the feeling of being truly seen and accepted as they are. In many cases, this alone is more healing than any advice or intervention, because it gives the other person a safe space to express themselves and to find their own answers. At the same time, listening in this way opens us to seeing the world through another's perspective, softening the rigidity of our own beliefs, and gradually making us more compassionate toward differences. On a personal level, the practice of stillness brings with it a very particular kind of freedom, the freedom from being ruled by old stories. Each of us carries memories, wounds, and beliefs shaped by the past, and often they quietly dictate how we feel and react in the present. By sitting still and observing, we start to notice these stories as they surface, a memory that makes us react more strongly than needed, a fear rooted in an earlier experience, or a recurring thought pattern like an old tune on repeat. We do not notice them in order to erase them immediately. but to step out of identification with them, to see that we are not those stories, and that we have the choice to live in a new way. This is a turning point, because it gives us the power to rewrite our own script instead of being forced to act out what was programmed long ago. When this inner observation is practiced long enough, a deeper shift begins to take place. We no longer seek validation of our worth from the outside as much as we once did. Even without agreement or praise from others, we can feel whole and complete. No longer obsessed with proving ourselves, we can devote more energy to living in alignment with what truly matters. This does not make us indifferent or detached. In fact, it allows us to love and help others from a place free of the need for anything in return. Acts of kindness become more pure because they are no longer mixed with the need for recognition, and this naturally makes our connection with the world more genuine. From the outside, living in stillness might look like someone who takes part in fewer debates, who shares fewer opinions, or who sometimes chooses silence instead of speaking up. But this silence does not come from fear or a lack of interest. It comes from a conscious choice. It is choosing to hold back words that do not need to be spoken, to listen more in order to understand more, and to allow events to reveal themselves before drawing conclusions. In a world that constantly pushes us to react quickly and to express ourselves endlessly, this ability becomes a form of soft strength, helping us avoid exhaustion from the relentless pace, while keeping our mind spacious enough to take in many perspectives. In time, as stillness becomes a natural part of life, we carry it with us into every situation, not just when meditating or in a quiet place, but even in the middle of a busy street, a hectic workday, or a complex conversation. This stillness no longer depends on external conditions. It becomes an inner state we can sustain regardless of what is happening. It is like a small lamp burning steadily in the heart, a flame that no wind from the outside can extinguish. That lamp is what allows us to move through long days without getting swept up in chaos, keeping each action, each word, and each thought rooted in a place of depth and clarity, a place where we always know who we are, where we are, and why we are living. When stillness is practiced until it infuses each breath and gesture, we begin to realize that it is not a technique or method we have to do, but a quality already within us. All we need is to clear away the layers of anxiety, comparison, judgment, and expectation for it to reveal itself. Just as the sky is never lost even when covered by clouds, the stillness within us never disappears. Even when thoughts and feelings are constantly moving, we have simply grown so used to identifying with those movements that we forget the unmoving foundation beneath them. Once we return to that foundation, every experience, whether joyful or painful, easy or difficult, becomes an opportunity to return home, to realize that we are not defined by what is happening, but are simply witnessing it as it passes through. This is the great difference between living stillness and frozen silence. Living stillness does not eliminate emotions or thoughts. It holds them within a space wide enough for them to rise and fade naturally, like waves that swell and recede on an ocean that remains undisturbed in its depths. In that space, our attention becomes sharp but not tense. We start to notice details we once overlooked, the smallest change in someone's expression, the faint rustle of leaves far away, the coolness of the morning air against our skin. These details are no longer background noise. but part of a complete picture, reminding us that life is always unfolding here and now, and that with deep enough presence, every moment holds a richness far beyond what words can capture. From this awareness, a natural gratitude arises, not gratitude because something good has happened, but gratitude for being fully present in this very moment, no matter what color it carries. When nourished daily, this gratitude becomes a quiet strength that helps us move through circumstances that might once have broken us. On a hard day, when everything seems against us, pausing to take one deep breath and realizing we still have breath itself. We still have eyes to see, feet to walk, and someone to think of. These simple facts can dissolve resistance and frustration, returning us to an openness toward whatever is happening. From this state, we no longer try to avoid or fight everything we dislike, but become curious about it, asking what lesson or gift it might carry. Sometimes, it is precisely in a failure or loss that we discover a new depth within ourselves, or uncover an entirely new path, something we might never have recognized without that event. The ability to remain in stillness also changes the way we use words. We become more careful, not out of fear or caution, but from recognizing that every word has the power to create or destroy connection, to heal or to harm. Stillness helps us hear the sound inside before speaking, so we can tell whether what we are about to say comes from sincerity and compassion, or merely from hurt, pride, or fear. This does not mean we always say things that are easy to hear, but that we choose the timing and manner that minimize misunderstanding or unnecessary pain. The result is that conversations become deeper and more real, built on the foundation of presence rather than rushed attempts to fill the space with empty words. Stillness is also the ideal environment for wisdom to grow. When the mind is no longer constantly distracted, deeper thoughts begin to arise, not the looping, anxious kind, but ideas, connections, and fresh insights. This is why so many great sages, artists, and scientists have spent time alone in stillness, not to escape the world, but to listen to the subtlest voice within, where the real answers often wait in silence. A single moment of clarity like that might last only seconds, but it can change the entire direction of a life. With enough practice, we also begin to realize that inner stillness does not always mean emotional calm. There are times when it comes hand in hand with deep pain, unease, or confusion, but the difference is, we no longer try to push those feelings away. We allow them to be present in our awareness, knowing that, like everything else, they too will change. It is precisely this not running away attitude that allows uncomfortable emotions to fade more quickly, because they no longer have to shout in order to be noticed. This is one of the paradoxes of practicing stillness. Only when we are willing to fully experience what we most want to avoid do we find true peace. From that foundation, our relationships with the outer world become less tense. We no longer depend on other people changing in order for us to feel okay, because we have found an inner anchor that no one can take away. This does not make us passive in the face of harmful behavior, on the contrary. It allows us to respond with greater clarity and effectiveness, because we are not driven by anger or fear. This steadiness is often felt by others, sometimes even when we say nothing, and it can quietly inspire them to seek their own sense of stillness. Going further, when stillness becomes a way of life, it begins to influence the way we choose our environment. work, and lifestyle, we naturally feel drawn to spaces, people, and activities that nourish this quality, and less interested in things that are overly noisy, chaotic, or rooted in stressful competition. This is not because we are closing ourselves off, but because we realize that what we cultivate inside will determine the quality of life outside. By choosing this way, we gradually create an ecosystem that supports and sustains stillness, from the room we live in, to the conversations we take part in, to the way we arrange our daily time. Eventually, when stillness becomes a true companion, we no longer see it as a special state, but as the normal foundation of all our activities. Whether we are washing dishes, driving, working, or talking with someone, there is always a part of us that is observing, resting, and aware that we are here. This is where time seems to slow down, where every action, no matter how small, feels full of meaning, and where life is no longer divided into important and trivial things. Living from this foundation, we realize that happiness is not a mountaintop to climb, but a current flowing right beneath our feet, waiting only for us to pause long enough to feel it. When stillness has become a natural part of life, it begins to permeate moments in which we once thought we could never remain peaceful. In a tense meeting, amid overlapping voices and time pressure, instead of being swept into the tide of argument, we notice we can keep our breath steady, observing each word and each rising emotion as if sitting beside a river, watching it carry away bits of debris. In a personal conflict, when sharp words could easily be spoken, we sense a small gap between intention and action, a space wide enough for us to recognize what will nourish connection and what will destroy it. Gradually, we find we are no longer reacting automatically, but responding with conscious choice. This difference changes the quality of every relationship, because people can feel when we are fully present and not driven by anger or fear. Stillness also begins to change the way we see success and failure. In the past, success was often measured by external criteria, status, wealth, recognition, and failure was anything that fell short of those measures. But after tasting stillness, we begin to see that both success and failure are only temporary forms, arriving and departing like the weather. A successful project may bring joy, but it cannot become a lasting foundation for happiness if our mind is unsettled. A failure may cause sadness, but if we turn inward and observe, we will see it is only one step in a much larger process of learning. This frees us from dependence on outcomes, allowing us to work and live with a freer spirit, because our worth is no longer tied to a single script about how things must unfold. When the mind is less preoccupied with controlling results, it becomes more sensitive to what is happening right now. On a morning while making tea, we might notice the gentle aroma spreading through the air, the warmth of the cup in our hands, the sound of water dripping into the pot, small details that open up a surprising sense of fullness, as if we are living completely within a single moment. From such experiences, we begin to understand that true richness does not come from having more, but from feeling more deeply. This changes the way we consume, less chasing after novelty from outside, more cherishing what is already here, less buying to fill an emptiness, more caring for and using what we have with attention and gratitude. Stillness also brings a kind of courage quite different from what we usually imagine. It is not the boldness to face physical danger, but the courage to face ourselves, to look directly at our shadows, our deeply ingrained habits, our unhealed wounds, without avoidance or disguise. With stillness as a foundation, we find the bravery to sit with fear instead of rushing to banish it, to acknowledge anger instead of playing the part of the eternally calm person, to accept our own vulnerability instead of pretending to be strong. This courage helps us peel away layers of masks and defenses, becoming an original, authentic human being, no longer controlled by unconscious reactions or the expectations of others. In this process, compassion deepens, because we realize that everyone is carrying invisible battles inside them. When we have seen our own dark places and know how hard they are to cross, we become less quick to judge others, and more inclined to give them patience and understanding. Compassion is no longer a moral concept or a learned behavior, but a natural response of the heart when it is no longer covered by layers of prejudice. Stillness creates the space for us to truly see the person behind the behavior, and that is where real connection begins. By living in stillness, we also discover something interesting. The energy we once spent on worrying, arguing, and defending our views is now freed for more meaningful things. We can spend more time creating, learning, or simply savoring the ordinary moments we used to miss in our rush. This energy also allows us to be more fully present with those we love, listening without cutting them off, being with them without glancing at a phone, sharing without mixing in judgment or unsolicited advice. That presence gradually becomes the most precious gift we can offer the world, because it not only makes others feel safe and valued, but also awakens in them a desire to be more present themselves. Stillness spreads not through speeches or slogans, but through the way we live. When others see us moving through turbulence without being swept away, they may begin to wonder whether they, too, could find such a steady place to stand. In moments like that, stillness is no longer just a personal practice. It becomes a seed planted in the shared soil of humanity, with the hope that one day it will sprout where it is most needed. At this point, we may realize that the path of stillness is not a journey away from life, but a full return to it. There is no fixed destination, no certificate proving we have arrived, only an ongoing ripening in our capacity to be present, to understand, and to love. Every day, whether short or long, easy or challenging, is an opportunity to practice, to remind ourselves to come back to the breath, to the beating of the heart, to the feeling of our feet on the ground. In that simplicity, a source of boundless strength and peace is always waiting, if only we pause long enough to notice. When stillness runs so deep that it is no longer separate from any other state, we begin to live as if carrying a clear, quiet lake within us. No matter how many times the wind changes outside, the surface of that lake retains its transparency. This does not mean we no longer experience anger, sadness, or confusion. On the contrary, we feel them more clearly, more subtly, but we also see the unmoving foundation behind them. Like someone who watches the sky knowing clouds may darken and vanish, knowing sunlight may blaze and then fade, but the sky remains the sky. This stillness allows us to witness life's changes without clinging or rejecting. From this state, a quiet trust in the wholeness of all things begins to grow, not a trust built on theories or teachings, but on direct experience that everything, whether difficult or delightful, has its place in the larger picture. This trust gradually dissolves the fear of loss. When we know that nothing can truly destroy the deepest part of ourselves, we no longer feel the need to hold on tightly for fear of losing, nor to rush forward for fear of missing out. A relationship may change form. A job may end. An opportunity may pass, but in stillness, we see that the essence of those experiences is not lost. They simply transform, like water taking new shapes as it flows through different bends in a river. From there, gratitude widens, not only for what we call good, but also for loss, because it helps us grow deeper and freer. In stillness, our concept of time begins to shift. Before, we were always racing against it, afraid we would not have enough time to achieve, to prove, to perfect. But when we rest in stillness, we begin to see that each moment contains the whole of life. It does not need to be shortened or sped up to reach some more important point. An afternoon spent watching the rain from the window is no longer a waste, but a complete experience. A slow meal is no longer a luxury, but a way to be present and to truly taste life. When we stop being haunted by what must come next, we see clearly that what matters most is often hidden in the simple things we once overlooked. From that foundation, the way we make both big and small decisions begins to change. We no longer choose based only on ambition or outward security, but on a deep sense of inner harmony. An opportunity that promises high income but drains our energy and unsettles our mind becomes less appealing than a job that is modest yet nourishes our creativity and peace. A relationship that is intense but full of tension is no longer as attractive as a simple but genuine connection. Stillness becomes a subtle compass, helping us see what truly sustains us and what only offers temporary allure. This capacity also makes us less affected by comparison. When living in the noise of the world, it is easy to measure ourselves by achievements, appearance, status, or the number of likes on some platform. But after tasting stillness, we understand that our worth cannot be defined by measures that change with seasons and trends. Confidence now is not the feeling of being better than someone, but the feeling that we do not need to be better than anyone to be ourselves. From this, a lightness emerges, a relief from playing roles, from constant competition, from proving anything beyond simply living truthfully. In that lightness, joy becomes purer. It no longer needs big thrills or major accomplishments to arise, but often comes from small things: a morning without hurry, a heartfelt conversation, a moment of realizing we are breathing and everything is okay. This joy is not easily taken away, because it does not depend on outside conditions. Even in difficult times, it remains like a quiet undercurrent of light, reminding us that life is still unfolding and still carries its own beauty. When joy is no longer bound by conditions, compassion grows stronger. We can give our time, energy, and attention to others without feeling depleted, because we are not giving in order to get something in return. Helping becomes a natural part of life, like a tree blooming or a spring flowing, not for any reason other than that it is their nature. Those who receive can sense this unconditional quality, and sometimes that alone is what truly touches their heart. Stillness also opens a new depth in learning. Without the pressure to succeed quickly, we can approach knowledge and skills with curiosity and patience. We listen more carefully, observe more closely, and thus understand more deeply. Learning is no longer just a means to achieve something in the future, but a joy in the present, the joy of discovering something new, of connecting ideas, of seeing a perspective we had never considered. This allows wisdom to grow in a natural, steady, and creative way. When these qualities, peace, freedom, gratitude, compassion, merge, we realize that we are living far more fully than before. Even if on the outside little has changed, others may see us doing the same familiar work, walking the same familiar streets, meeting the same familiar people. But inside, each step is different, each breath is different. Stillness does not take us away from the world. It allows us to walk within it with a wider heart and clearer eyes. In the end, perhaps the deepest gift that stillness gives us is the realization that we do not need to wait until everything is perfect to be at peace. Peace is not hidden in some ideal future. It is here in this very moment. If we only pause long enough to notice it, once we see this, we no longer need to chase it anywhere else, because we know the only place to find it is right here, right now. And that is the greatest freedom a human being can experience. When we enter a new stage of the journey, where inner stillness has become a steady companion, we begin to recognize an even deeper truth. Every experience, whether gentle or harsh, is an anonymous teacher, bringing us lessons that no book or lecture could ever replace. Moments of happiness teach us gratitude, but it is in times of hurt, loss, and disappointment that we develop resilience and the ability to see life from a deeper place. In the light of stillness, difficulties no longer appear as enemies, but as part of the path to maturity, because it is often in the darkness of adversity that the seeds of wisdom and compassion are planted and begin to grow. Just as soil becomes fertile only after enduring storms and heavy rains, our soul sometimes needs upheaval to break through its old shell, allowing new life to rise. This way of seeing also transforms our relationship with ourselves at the very root. In the past, when we made mistakes or failed, we might have blamed ourselves, covered it up, or tried to hide from the judgment of others. But when we understand that every experience is part of the journey, we learn to embrace even our weaknesses and clumsy moments, not to excuse them, but to face them with honesty and gentleness. When a mistake is met with compassion, it becomes a doorway to learning rather than a wound to bury. From there, we slowly become our own best friend, knowing how to encourage ourselves when needed, how to remain silent when the mind is tangled, and how to remind ourselves to rise again when we fall. This shift naturally extends to how we see others. When we recognize that we, too, have been misguided by fear, made poor choices, or acted in ways that did not reflect our truest self, we begin to understand that others are no different. No one is defined by their actions in a single moment. Everyone is on their own journey. And often the most difficult behaviors come from unhealed pain. Approaching others with this understanding softens judgment, increases patience, and gradually changes relationships, not because we are trying to fix anyone, but because we have changed the way we show up for them. One of the most striking effects of living with stillness is that we become less caught in the imagined stories the mind creates. In the past, a cold glance or a single unexpected comment might have been enough for us to weave an entire tale about what someone was thinking, feeling, or plotting against us. When nurtured, these assumptions can grow into walls of mistrust. But with clear awareness, we see that most of these stories exist only in our minds, with no real evidence, and we do not need to believe them. That awareness is like removing the fuse from an emotional bomb, allowing us to react less dramatically and to act based on reality rather than speculation. Living in this state also allows us to enjoy genuine relationships more deeply. When we are no longer obsessed with controlling how others see us, we can be fully present in conversations, listening without preparing our reply, sharing without calculating what benefit it might bring. Every encounter becomes an opportunity to truly see and be seen, free from the lens of expectation or prejudice. Relationships like this rarely need grand gestures or drama to thrive. Instead, they are steady and nourishing, because they are built on sincerity and respect. Stillness also brings a special ability, the ability to be alone without feeling lonely. When we no longer need noise or busyness to fill the space, we begin to find joy in quiet moments with ourselves. An evening reading a book, a morning walk in the park, or simply sitting by the window watching the light change. All of these can become profound experiences when we are fully present. In this state, solitude is not a gap to be filled, but a space for renewal, for listening to our inner voice, for realizing that even with no one beside us, we are whole. From this sense of wholeness, our choices are less driven by the fear of missing out or by social pressure. We do not need to join every conversation, follow every trend, or seize every opportunity just to avoid being left behind. Instead, we choose more selectively, investing time and energy in what truly matters, in relationships that genuinely nourish us, and in work that aligns with our deepest values. This not only reduces exhaustion but also creates a profound sense of freedom, because we know we are living by choice, not by habit. As we continue to live in stillness, something interesting happens. We start to notice that the outer world reflects the inner one. When the mind is in chaos, the world around us easily feels tangled and irritating. When the mind is calm, the same situation can be seen through gentler eyes. This does not mean we can control every event, but it does mean we recognize that our true power lies in how we receive and interpret them. In this awareness, we no longer feel like victims of circumstance. We become creators of our own living experience. Ultimately, the greatest reward of going deep into stillness is realizing that peace is not a far-off destination, but a stream that is always flowing, waiting for us to return. Whenever we notice that we have been swept up in anxiety or desire, we only need to pause, take a deep breath, and remember that we can return to the present moment instantly. We do not need to wait for everything to be resolved, for our mood to improve, or for life to become less turbulent. Peace is already here, beneath the waves of all thoughts and feelings, ready to welcome us back. When we see this, we understand that the real journey is not about finding a place, but about learning to stay with ourselves in all circumstances, so that at any moment, we can say, "I am home." When stillness becomes an unshakable foundation, we begin to see the world with a clarity unlike before, like a pane of glass that has been wiped clean, revealing every image in sharp, delicate detail. Things once dismissed as trivial now carry deep meaning. The sound of leaves falling on a breezy afternoon, sunlight streaming through the gaps in the foliage to paint warm gold on the ground. or the cool touch of the floor beneath bare feet on a quiet morning. The mind no longer chases after the next special thing to satisfy it, but instead learns to treasure each simple moment as if it were all we needed. This transformation is not the result of forceful willpower, but comes naturally, like soil absorbing rainwater, slowly, silently, yet deeply and enduringly. When we no longer chase after standards built by society or shaped by old fears, we find ourselves living to a more natural rhythm. Instead of forcing ourselves to finish everything in the shortest time possible or to reach a goal on a predetermined schedule, we begin to allow things to unfold at their own pace. Patience becomes a skill we do not have to memorize, but one that arises naturally when we understand that everything has its own season. A seed needs time to sprout. A river needs time to reach the sea. And people, too, need time to grow. When we accept this, we no longer feel as though we are behind anyone. We are simply in the right place, at the right time, moving at the pace that fits us best. That sense of being in the right place at the right time gives us a kind of confidence unlike the outward kind that can be shaken when circumstances change. This is a quiet confidence, calm, unassuming, never needing to boast, yet always present like an underground spring, nourishing every choice and every action. When facing a challenge, we no longer rush to prove ourselves or fight at all costs. Instead, we calmly observe, identify what is truly necessary, and act from a steady foundation. That steadiness does not come from believing we will always win, but from knowing that no matter the outcome, we will remain whole. Living in this state also makes us more mindful of our everyday choices, even the smallest ones. A meal is no longer just a way to fill the stomach, but an opportunity to nourish both body and mind. A conversation is no longer just an exchange of information, but a chance to connect in a meaningful way. Even the tasks once considered mundane, folding the blanket in the morning, washing dishes after dinner, become moments of meditation when done with full attention. These actions, carried out in stillness, create a nurturing cycle that steadies the mind, making whatever comes next feel lighter. This shift also transforms how we respond to conflict. Instead of immediately defending our viewpoint or trying to win an argument, we can step back for a moment, listening closely to what the other person is saying, not just the words, but what lies beneath them. Often, what someone needs is not a solution, but simply the feeling that they have been heard and understood. Approaching a situation from stillness makes it easier to see which issues truly require immediate action and which can be left for time to soften. This not only reduces conflict but also builds trust and strengthens relationships. Another gift of stillness is the ability to recognize our true limits and to protect our energy and peace of mind. In the past, we might have agreed to help or join every activity out of fear of disappointing others or missing out. But once we understand that our presence is meaningful only when it comes from a place of wholeness, we begin to say no with gentleness yet firmness. Saying no is no longer selfish, it is an act of care for both ourselves and others. Because we know that reluctant agreement never brings real value. From protecting our energy, we also learn to invest more deeply in what matters most. Instead of scattering our attention across dozens of different concerns, we choose a few that truly hold meaning and give them our full devotion. This focus creates a different quality in our work. in our relationships, and in our inner life. A project done with steady attention moves forward with solid progress. A relationship nurtured with genuine presence deepens. A moment lived fully becomes a lasting memory. As these changes accumulate, we realize we have shifted from living to achieve to living to be present. No longer swept away by the constant search for the next goal. We can enjoy the very path we are walking, whether it leads through a golden field in the sun or a rocky stretch of road. Every experience, sweet or challenging, holds equal value, because the most important thing is no longer the destination, but how we walk. This realization brings a rare kind of freedom, one that does not depend on circumstances, is not bound by time, and cannot be taken away by anyone. It comes from returning to ourselves, trusting the natural rhythm of life, and seeing that peace has always been here, waiting for us to notice and receive it. Once we touch this truth, we know that every outer journey is only a reflection of the inner one, and that at any moment, in any place, we can return to the quiet home within our own heart. When the inner journey has matured, stillness is no longer a state we have to try to maintain. It becomes as natural as breathing, as steady as the heartbeat or the flow of blood in our veins. Always present, always sustaining us, whether we are aware of it or not. From that foundation, we begin to see life's events as waves upon the ocean, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce, yet never altering the essence of the water itself. Every situation, whether a joyful surprise or a painful loss, is met with a steadiness that comes from the deepest part of us, where the noise of praise and blame, gain and loss, victory and defeat cannot reach. This steadiness is not indifference or numbness, but a kind of gentle wisdom, able to flow with the current without losing itself, able to hold what is here without gripping so tightly that it suffocates it. The more we live in this state, the more we see that the things we once thought of as ultimate goals, success, fame, wealth, are really just temporary forms the mind clings to. They may bring excitement for a while, but they rarely last, because their nature is to change. When we see this clearly, we no longer let our life be fully dictated by external goals. Instead, we focus on maintaining a stable inner quality, where peace, gratitude, and wholeness do not depend on circumstances. From here, every achievement, whether small or great, simply becomes an interesting rest stop along the way, not the only place where we pin all our hopes. In the space of stillness, our connection with the world becomes more refined. We begin to notice subtle yet deeply meaningful signs. The way someone's eyes light up when they feel heard. The soft squeeze of a hand like a silent thank you. Or how a sudden breeze carries the fragrance of a flower we once loved. These moments, so easily overlooked when the mind is busy, now become priceless gifts, nourishing a profound sense of belonging to life itself. We start to see that the world is not made only of grand events, but also of countless small details where the essence of life is reflected in its purest form. From this foundation, our relationships gradually become more refined as well. We no longer hold on to connections just to fill an emptiness or to avoid loneliness. Instead, we choose to nurture relationships built on mutual respect, understanding, and support. In such relationships, silence is no longer awkward. Words are no longer driven by the need to prove something. And every meeting, no matter how brief, feels complete. We also realize that some people are meant to walk with us only for a short stretch. And that is perfectly okay. For not every connection is meant to last forever. Understanding this, we learn to let go with love, allowing each person to continue their own journey without clinging to a sense of loss. Sustained stillness also brings a profound change in how we respond to sudden difficulties. Instead of being pulled into a spiral of panic or blame, we step back to observe the situation from a safe distance, enough to see that a hasty reaction often makes the problem more complicated. That small pause becomes the space where wisdom can step in, guiding us toward the choice that causes the least harm, not only to ourselves, but also to others involved. This is a skill that can only take root when we are familiar with staying present with our emotions, not fleeing, not suppressing, and not rushing to push them away. In daily life, this grounded presence helps us find meaning even in repetitive tasks. Something as simple as sweeping the floor, cooking a meal, or folding clothes can become a quiet ritual that brings us back to the present moment when done with full attention. We begin to see that joy is not in finishing the task quickly so we can move on to something more important, but in realizing that we are living, breathing, and participating in a process that nourishes both ourselves and our surroundings. This transforms each day into a string of moments worth cherishing, rather than a to-do list to be completed. Perhaps the greatest shift is in how we see time. In the past, time was often the enemy, slipping away too quickly, carrying off opportunities we had not yet seized. Now, time becomes a flow of which we are a part, not something to conquer, not something to fear being left behind by. When we accept that every stage of life has its own value, we stop comparing ourselves to the versions of who we should be, or could have been, in the past or the future. We live more fully in the present, knowing that no moment can ever be repeated, and that is precisely what makes it precious. This awareness also opens a new door for creativity. When the mind is no longer bound by the pressure to produce something impressive or perfect, we can create from a place of freedom, where ideas come and go naturally, unhindered by the fear of failure. Whether it is writing a paragraph, painting a picture, or simply finding a new way to arrange the furniture, each creative act becomes a conversation with ourselves, a way to explore corners of our being we had never touched before. This creativity does not need to result in something that is recognized or praised, because its true value lies in the process itself. Ultimately, living in long-lasting stillness reveals that true peace is not a reward reserved for those who have done enough, been good enough, or earned it. Peace is always there, unbiased, unconditional, waiting for us to return. The moment we stop searching for it outside and realize it has never left us, all resistance and worry soften at once. Only then do we understand that the deepest spiritual journey is not about finding something new, but about slowly removing the layers of dust covering the truth that has been within us all along. The truth that we have always carried within us, a sky of stillness, unchanging amidst all the shifts of life. When stillness has sunk so deeply that it becomes a natural part of our being, we begin to sense a more subtle layer of awareness, where life's fluctuations no longer stir up stormy waves in the mind, but only ripple the surface of consciousness in gentle circles. Praise or criticism, success or failure, welcoming handshakes or closing doors, They all pass like drifting clouds across a vast sky, leaving only faint traces before disappearing, no longer able to shape or control our state of mind as they once did. In this state, peace is no longer a goal to be achieved, but the underlying current of life itself, always there, always supporting us, no matter how the scenery outside changes. From this foundation, a deep transformation begins in how we understand the value of life. In the past, much of our time was driven by questions like, what will I achieve? What must I do to be recognized? Or, how can I make everything better? Now, these questions lose their weight, giving way to a new curiosity. Does this truly nourish me? Am I living this moment fully? Am I genuinely connected to what I am doing and to the people around me? This shift in the focus of our questions is like moving from chasing a distant lighthouse to realizing that the light is already shining within us. With less compulsion to prove ourselves, we begin to be fully present in each experience. A simple meal is no longer just to satisfy hunger, but an opportunity to taste its flavors, feel its textures, and appreciate the story behind each ingredient. A conversation is no longer dominated by the urge to reply cleverly, but becomes a space for deep listening, where every glance, every pause, every nuance of tone holds meaning. Even seemingly empty moments, waiting for the bus, standing in line, or sitting in silence, become chances to breathe more slowly, to observe, and to feel our presence within the flow of the world. From this presence, gratitude begins to arise naturally. We no longer wait for special occasions to feel blessed. Instead, we notice that each deep breath, each morning we wake, each chance to love and be loved is already a gift. This gratitude is not loud or showy, but steady like an underground stream, quietly quenching the invisible thirst of the mind. It also becomes the foundation that allows us to face challenges without sinking into despair. Because even in difficulty, there are always small things to be thankful for: a friend who listens, a ray of sunlight through the window, or simply our own resilience. In this process, we also learn to let go of unnecessary expectations of others. Instead of wanting them to act according to some ideal script we've written in our minds, we accept that each person is walking their own path, with their own lessons, pains, and limitations. This acceptance does not mean condoning harmful behavior, but rather seeing the bigger picture, that people's reactions often have less to do with our true worth and more to do with the state of their own inner world. When we release the weight of expectation, we create a space where others can show up more authentically, and we ourselves are freer in the way we love and connect. That freedom extends into how we face life's big upheavals. When loss comes, the passing of a loved one, the shattering of a dream, the closing of a chapter, instead of resisting or trying to hide the pain, we allow ourselves to feel it fully. In that feeling, we realize that suffering is not an enemy to be defeated, but a messenger carrying insight into what truly matters to us. When pain is accepted rather than denied, it begins to transform, like ice melting to reveal the warm current beneath. We find ourselves growing softer, and paradoxically, stronger each time we pass through the shadows. This ability also changes our relationship with the future. Instead of seeing it as a distant land filled with ifs and musts, we begin to approach it as an extension of the present. We still make plans, still dream, But we are no longer obsessed with everything unfolding exactly as we imagined. Each plan becomes a flexible sketch, ready to be redrawn when circumstances shift, like a rower who knows the river will always have unexpected bends, yet still keeps their hands steady on the oars and their gaze forward. In the depth of stillness, we also see that what we give often returns to us in ways we could not have predicted. A word of encouragement may become the seed that helps someone through a difficult season. A small act of kindness may ripple through many lives and circle back to us when we most need it. Yet, living in this state, we no longer give in order to receive. We give simply because it is the most natural way to exist. Like a tree offering shade or a spring offering water. Giving from this place of no calculation is light, enduring, and quietly powerful. Ultimately, at the deepest level of this experience, we see that every search outward leads us back within. Every journey, every upheaval, every joy and sorrow is simply a different path leading to the same point. The place where we can sit with ourselves, no conditions, no answers, no story to define who we are. In that place, we no longer see ourselves as a traveler searching for home, but as one who has been home all along, only now truly realizing it. And once we touch this understanding, every moment, whether dawn or nightfall, laughter or tears, becomes a whole and unshakable part of that inner home of stillness. As we walk long enough on this path, we begin to realize that inner stillness is not just a personal resting place. It is a quiet force that subtly influences everything around us. The presence of a calm person is like a candle burning steadily in a dark room, without moving. Without explanation, its light and warmth still touch everything nearby. Others may not immediately understand what is happening, but they will feel the ease, steadiness, and sincerity of that energy. In conversations, we find we are no longer driven to interrupt, to win an argument, or to leave an impression. Instead, we give space for silence, allowing the other person to breathe, to hear themselves, and often, that deep listening is the most complete answer of all. On a deeper level, we start to see clearly that most conflicts, misunderstandings, and hurts between people arise because each of us is looking at the world through our own lens. A lens shaped by life experience, fear, expectations, and personal stories etched over the years. Recognizing this, we stop blaming or judging too quickly, knowing we too carry our own lens. This understanding does not mean accepting everything passively, but it allows us to respond with more softness, to ask questions instead of rushing to conclusions, to look for common ground instead of fixating on differences. This is not weakness, but a form of mature strength, the strength of someone who is not swayed by ego, yet does not close the door of the heart. From this shift, our relationship with time also continues to change. We no longer see time as a scarce resource to be maximized, but as a companion, sometimes moving slowly, sometimes quickly, but always traveling alongside us. Living with this attitude, moments no longer pass with regret or urgency, because each one is lived fully in its own way. Even times of waiting, once a source of impatience, become opportunities to watch the breath, to notice what surrounds us, or simply to smile at our own presence. This piece also opens a different view of success. In the past, success was measured by specific milestones, a position, a number, an external recognition. But when the mind is still enough, We see that true success lies in living in harmony with ourselves and the world, keeping the heart from hardening in the face of pain, and from being blinded by the fleeting light of glory. Success is going to bed at night without heavy regrets, waking in the morning with gratitude for another day to love, to learn, to give something to life. These measures don't appear in reports, cannot be compared with anyone else's, yet they hold a value more lasting than any medal or title. In this state, we also begin to live with fewer needs, yet feel richer than ever. We no longer need a packed schedule to feel valuable, nor new possessions to fill a gap. Instead, we learn to appreciate what we already have. An old sweater that still keeps us warm, a familiar cup of tea each morning, a quiet corner to read, all become precious because they are wrapped in our full presence. With less restless wanting, we are also less driven by comparison, and this frees a great reservoir of energy that once was drained by invisible competition. This release allows us to invest more deeply in nurturing meaningful connections. We make time for unhurried meetings, for conversations that are not merely about exchanging information but about sharing presence. We write a handwritten letter instead of sending a rushed text. Take a walk with someone instead of only meeting through a screen. Listen to their story without holding a phone in our hand. In these moments, we realize that what determines the quality of a relationship is not how often we meet, but the level of presence and sincerity we bring to each meeting. With enough practice, a quiet change begins in how we relate to ourselves. We are no longer the harsh judge constantly scoring every action and thought. We begin to look at ourselves with the eyes of a good friend, ready to offer feedback when needed, but never forgetting compassion and gentleness. This self-acceptance does not make us complacent or careless, rather, it creates a safe foundation from which we can continue to learn and grow. When we no longer fear our own criticism, we dare to try new things, to correct mistakes, to live truthfully with the imperfect sides of ourselves. This experience also opens a new understanding of happiness. Happiness is no longer a distant destination waiting for us after everything is in order, but something we can feel even while things are still unfinished. It might be the moment we sit quietly in a small room while rain falls outside the window, a fresh morning when we take a deep breath, or the instant we realize we are smiling for no reason at all. When happiness is no longer dependent on everything being perfect, it becomes more enduring, because it is nourished by what cannot be taken away: presence, gratitude, and love. Ultimately, when we have lived long enough in this stillness and understanding, we see that every step on our life's journey, whether winding or straight, heavy or light, has value. No step is wasted, no turn is wrong, because every experience leaves a piece for the complete picture. This realization frees us from regret, from the "if only" question, and places us in a state of readiness to live fully in the moment. Here, we stop searching for a final answer, because we know the true answer is not at the end point, but in how we are walking right now, step by step. In stillness, in gratitude, and in deep connection with ourselves and the world. When the door opens to a deeper part of the journey, we recognize an obvious truth we often overlooked before: everything in life is temporary. Yet it is precisely this impermanence that makes each moment precious. A gentle sunny afternoon may come only once in a lifetime. A heartfelt conversation will never happen in exactly the same way again. Even the breath we take right now will never return in the same form. When we see this with the heart and not just the mind, we begin to treasure the small things and stop waiting for someday to live fully. That someday has never actually existed, there is only today. Here, this very moment, this awareness completely changes how we interact with the world. Tasks once considered repetitive or dull now become opportunities to practice presence. When washing a bowl, we no longer think only about finishing quickly to do something else. We notice the feel of water running over our hands, the gentle sound of porcelain, the gradual emergence of its shine. When walking, we no longer rush forward with our head down, but feel each step touch the earth. Hear the rustling leaves. Watch the light change along the street. This attention not only enriches our experience of life but also helps the mind wander less and settle more into the present. With enough time spent in this state, we begin to understand more deeply our connection with everything around us. We no longer see ourselves as separate, but as one link in a vast web of life. A small choice we make, buying a product, speaking a word, or even keeping silent, creates ripples that spread farther than we imagine. This understanding makes us more careful, not in a tense or controlling way, but with a gentleness born of love, like the way we hold a delicate flower more lightly once we realize what we are carrying. This state also changes how we relate to emotions. Instead of labeling them good or bad, should or shouldn't, we begin to see them as guests visiting. When joy comes, we invite it to sit down and enjoy it fully. When sadness arrives, we also invite it in and listen to the story it brings. Anger, fear, worry, they all become messages, not intruders. In this way, emotions are no longer suppressed until they explode, nor do they control our actions unconsciously. They are seen, acknowledged, and will naturally leave once their role is fulfilled. When we live with this respect and acceptance, we begin to realize that everyone around us is also going through their own waves of emotion, often ones they cannot control. This awareness deepens our empathy. Instead of reacting sharply to a careless comment or irritating action, we ask ourselves, what is making this person behave this way? What are they going through inside? The answer may not always be clear, but simply asking the question helps us step out of the trap of instant reaction and open the door to compassion. Compassion, when nurtured consistently, is not only a soft feeling for others but also an attitude of forgiveness toward ourselves. We stop punishing ourselves for past mistakes, stop comparing ourselves to unreal ideals. Instead, we learn to look back on what has been as an essential part of our growth. Without it, we could not have become who we are now. This forgiveness does not erase responsibility, but it frees our energy from the cycles of guilt and regret so we can invest it fully in the present. When energy is freed, a natural creativity begins to arise. No longer driven by fear of failure or judgment, we allow ourselves to experiment, explore, and create simply for the joy of the process. It might be painting a picture, writing a poem, cooking a new dish, or simply finding a warmer arrangement for our workspace. These creations, though not meant for profit or impression, hold a special value. They deepen our relationship with ourselves and with life. At the same time, this deep presence opens a new door to experiencing beauty. Beauty is no longer confined to what is shiny and perfect, but is present in simplicity, in what is unfinished, even in what is fading. A dried leaf with visible veins. An old wall with mottled patches. A face lined with wrinkles but still lit by bright eyes. All have their own stories and charm. When the mind is no longer obsessed with how things should look, we can finally see their beauty as they truly are. Through this process, we also come to understand more deeply that every peaceful moment is the result of countless conditions coming together in harmony. A quiet morning spent enjoying a cup of tea may be possible because rain fell the night before to soften the air. Because a farmer tended the tea plants through many seasons. Because a pair of hands picked, dried, and scented the leaves. Realizing this web of connection expands our gratitude, not only for what is right in front of us, but also for the unseen forces silently supporting us each day. All of these insights come together to create a steady foundation that allows us to walk through life without being swept away. It is not because life has become easier, but because within us there is now enough space to embrace everything, joy and sorrow, light and dark, gain and loss. This space does not freeze emotions or rigidly resist them, but is like the sky, ready for clouds to come and go, for winds to pass through and quiet down, for the sun to rise and set. Once we see that we are the sky itself, we no longer fear the storms, because we know that the storms are simply part of the natural cycle, and that after the storm, the sky remains vast, untouched, as if it had never been torn. When we live with the deep awareness that everything moves according to the law of arising and passing away, we stop searching for a state of perfection that will last forever, and instead learn to be fully present in each cycle of change. Every season of life bears its own fruit. Even the coldest winter holds seeds quietly preparing for spring. This way of seeing frees us from the pressure to keep everything good forever, because we understand that even the most beautiful thing must be allowed to change, making space for new forms of beauty to emerge. This letting go is not neglect, but a quiet trust that everything is unfolding according to its own nature, whether or not we interfere. This state nurtures in us a rare kind of patience. Patience is no longer forced endurance, but the calm knowing that every process has its own time. A seed needs time to sprout. A wound needs time to close. A person needs time to change habits or release pain. When patience becomes part of who we are, we no longer rush ourselves or others to achieve results immediately. Nor do we fear the stages that seem to be standing still. Instead, we see in that slowness a quiet, steady form of growth. This patience makes us a different kind of companion in relationships. Instead of trying to fix someone, we stay present with them, listen, and create space for them to see their own path. We no longer feel the urge to offer advice the moment someone shares something, but know when all that is needed is a nod or a gentle touch on the hand. This quiet space is often the most fertile ground for change, because it arises not from outside pressure, but from a natural awakening within each person. When facing difficulties, we also begin to see that the most challenging times often hold the richest material for growth. When loss comes, instead of immediately trying to fill the emptiness, we allow ourselves to sit with it. When a plan collapses, instead of labeling it as total failure, we look for the lessons and hidden opportunities beneath the chaos. This approach does not erase the pain, but it keeps the pain from turning into despair. It becomes a strict yet fair teacher. offering lessons that comfort and ease could never provide. From this foundation, we begin to live with a broader trust in the flow of life. Trust does not mean passively waiting for things to happen, but rather actively cooperating with what is arriving. We still act, still make choices, but are no longer obsessed with controlling every variable. Like a rower who reads the wind and water to adjust the oars. We learn to adapt ourselves to the rhythm of circumstances instead of fighting against them. This trust frees us from countless worries born from the need to know and secure every outcome. Living with this trust, we also find ourselves less trapped in the past. Painful memories or past mistakes are no longer chains, but chapters we have finished reading, still valuable to reference, but not something we must carry everywhere. When an old memory appears, instead of resisting or getting lost in it, we greet it like meeting an old acquaintance. Listen for a moment, and then let it go. This way of relating honors our experiences without allowing the past to control the present. Interestingly, when we no longer cling so tightly to defending our ego, we begin to see more clearly our own fragility and limits. And from that grows a genuine humility. Humility is no longer a polite phrase or a role played to be liked, but the natural result of realizing we are only a small part of a vast picture. This humility makes it easy to learn from anyone, whether they are younger, less experienced, or from a completely different background. It also makes us less hurt by criticism, because we understand that someone's feedback does not erase our value. From humility, a new kind of freedom appears, the freedom from the need to prove ourselves. When we no longer have to prove how intelligent, talented, or lovable we are, we can focus entirely on living true to our nature and abilities. This not only eases inner pressure, but also makes relationships more genuine, because they are no longer covered by the shell of image or expectation. In such sincerity, people feel safe to be themselves too. And from there, connections grow deeper and stronger. All of these changes combine to create a profound shift in how we define the meaning of life. Instead of chasing a single goal or a final destination, we see that meaning is not where we are headed, but how we walk right now. A day lived with awareness, gratitude, and connection is already a complete day, whether it happens in work, in love, or in a quiet moment with a cup of tea. This completeness needs no validation from others, because it is felt directly from within, like a single perfect note that rings out and fades into the air, leaving a warm echo in the listener's heart. As we walk further along this path, we realize that inner peace is not a fixed endpoint, but an ongoing process built through small choices each day. It does not come from one explosive moment of awakening, but is like an underground spring quietly flowing through layers of earth, soaking into roots, nourishing life without demanding attention. Each time we choose to listen instead of rushing to argue, to release instead of holding tight, to smile instead of frowning, we lay another small stone in the foundation of lasting calm. Looking back, we see we have traveled far from where we began, not because of some grand achievement, but because we have stopped being swept away by the shifting waves of our emotions. That peace is not separate from challenges, on the contrary. It is the difficulties that give it depth. Like a tree that only stands firm after weathering many seasons of storms. The human soul matures when it learns to remain steady in adversity. Each loss, each disappointment, Each wound forces us to face the most vulnerable parts within, yet also opens the door to discovering a resilience we never knew we had. From there, we no longer see hardship as an enemy, but as a strict yet devoted teacher, always giving us the lessons we need, whether or not we want them. Recognizing the role of difficulty, we also begin to change the way we face fear. Instead of letting fear decide our limits, we take small steps into the unknown, accepting that the unease we feel is simply part of expanding ourselves. A trip to a place we've never been, a conversation we've avoided for years, a decision to leave behind what's familiar to start over. Each of these is like opening a door into new rooms within ourselves. The fear is still there, but no longer as a chain. It becomes a signal that we are moving closer to a wider version of who we are. From these experiences, a new trust begins to grow, a trust in our own ability to heal. We see that just as the body knows how to mend a wound when given rest and care, the mind and heart also know how to find balance if we give them enough space and gentleness. This changes the way we view our inner cracks. They are no longer signs of permanent damage, but proof that we have lived, loved, lost, and are in the process of being reborn. Healing is not always quick or easy, but every small step forward is a quiet victory. At the same time, we start to feel a deeper connection to all living beings around us. A wildflower by the roadside, a sparrow on a branch, even a stray cat wandering a narrow alley, they all offer subtle lessons in presence and acceptance. They do not care about recognition or praise, nor do they worry about whether they are good enough. They simply live fully in each moment, stretching toward the sun, bowing in the rain, lifting themselves again when the sky clears. Watching them, we learn that the essence of life is not in racing toward somewhere, but in opening ourselves to what is here. This connection extends to people as well. With a softened heart, we find it easier to empathize with others' stories, pains, and even mistakes. We understand that everyone is fighting invisible battles they may never speak of. This does not mean we condone every action, but it allows us to see the person behind the behavior. And that changes how we respond. Instead of reacting with judgment, we choose to respond with patience and compassion, not because we are noble, but because we know it is the only way to preserve peace for both sides. Living in this way also helps us let go of the need to control outcomes. We still set goals and put in effort, but no longer cling to the idea that things must unfold exactly according to plan. When events don't go our way, instead of sinking into disappointment, we look for new meaning in the new circumstances. Often, what we first saw as an obstacle becomes a turning point leading to paths we had never imagined, introducing us to people and experiences we would have missed otherwise. Each time this happens, our trust in the wisdom of life's flow deepens. Gradually, a new kind of freedom forms, the freedom from the constant pressure to prove our worth. When we are no longer driven by others' expectations or gaze, we can choose the path that matches the rhythm of our own heart. Even if it isn't glamorous or widely admired, it might be quiet work that brings peace, a simple life rich in love, or a creative journey with no commercial aim. This freedom is precious because no one can take it away, and it allows us to live closer to our true nature. At this point, we begin to see that every action, no matter how small, can become a sacred ritual if done with presence and care. A family meal, a morning of brewing tea, an afternoon sweeping the yard. Each can be an opportunity to nurture stillness and connection. When we live like this, the line between time for practice and ordinary life disappears, the two become one. And life itself becomes the path. This is perhaps what many call dwelling in peace, not retreating from the world, but being fully present within it, with a heart unshaken by the winds of impermanence. Stepping into the deeper part of the journey, we realize that true awakening does not stop at personal peace, but gradually expands into a current that affects the world around us. When the mind is no longer caught in the cycles of wanting, fearing, liking, disliking, we start to see every interaction as an opportunity to plant seeds of goodness. A gentle word instead of criticism. A small act of help instead of indifference. A moment of listening instead of interrupting. These may seem simple, but they create ripples that spread far beyond what we can see. We understand that we do not need to do grand things to influence the world. It is the small, consistent acts done with a clear heart that change the very atmosphere of a place. This way of seeing makes us more aware of our connection to the community. We no longer see ourselves as bystanders, but as part of an intricate web of life, where every choice we make has an effect, whether direct or indirect. This awareness awakens a natural sense of responsibility, not the forced kind dictated by rules, but a genuine desire to help make the shared space lighter and more peaceful. When a community has many people living with this mindset, needless conflicts decrease, moments of support increase, and a nourishing circle begins to form. In this process, we also learn that to share peace with the world, we must continually return to tend to our own inner garden. No one can pour water from an empty vessel, and no one can offer stability when they themselves are in turmoil. This does not mean withdrawing entirely from the busyness of life, but rather finding, recharging, moments within the current of everyday living. A morning without touching the phone. A deep breath before replying to a tense message. A few minutes of silence before stepping into a meeting. These small habits, once they become a foundation, help us maintain a steady state of mind, so that we can give without becoming depleted. Another facet of spiritual maturity is the ability to see value even in the imperfect pieces. When we cling to idealized images, we are often disappointed when others or circumstances fail to meet our expectations. But after enough seasons of ups and downs, we understand that true beauty often lies in what is unfinished, in the scratches that tell a story of endurance and journey. Like the Japanese art of kintsugi, in which broken pottery is mended with gold, human cracks can also become points of light if embraced rather than hidden. This perspective makes us more patient with others, and gentler with ourselves. This state leads us to a new harmony with time. We are no longer driven by the urge to race through an endless list of goals before time runs out. Instead, we begin to live as though we already have everything needed for this moment. This does not mean abandoning aspiration, but shifting our approach, making each goal into a journey worth living, not just a destination. When we are no longer obsessed with the future, the present becomes more spacious and abundant. Every breath, every glance, every touch carries its own worth, without needing to be used to get somewhere else. Something remarkable happens when we live this way. Our connections become more genuine than ever. When we meet someone, They feel truly seen and heard, not as part of our plans or interests, but as they are. This full presence is a rare gift in a busy world, and it deepens relationships without the need for many words. Simple conversations over a cup of tea can leave a longer-lasting imprint than grand occasions, because they happen in a space of truth and trust. Living in that truth, we also discover that happiness is no longer something to chase. It emerges as a natural state when the mind stops resisting what is. It is not a constant high, but a lightness that comes from no longer running away or clinging on. Even sad days can hold happiness, if we are still enough to notice the fragile beauty of a raindrop on the window, or the softness of late afternoon light spilling across the floor. When happiness is not bound to conditions, it becomes more enduring, like a small, warm flame that burns steadily in the heart. At this point, the circle closes. We return to what began the journey: presence. But now, presence is no longer just a technique to practice. It has become a natural way of being. We no longer need to remind ourselves to pay attention each time, because the mind has grown accustomed to staying with the moment. This attention flows into every action, word, and thought, turning life into a unified stream, no longer divided between living and practicing. Every step, every breath, every moment is part of the path, and the path is life itself. As we walk further with the awareness that every moment contains the seed of awakening, we start to sense a subtle but profound shift in how we see the world. No longer is there a separation between what is important and what is trivial, between moments to remember and moments to overlook. Everything, from the song of a bird outside the porch at dawn to the accidental brush of a stranger's hand, becomes a precious element of life. The distinctions of big-small, high-low fade away, replaced by an attitude of equal welcome, as if each event has its irreplaceable place in the whole picture. This way of seeing makes life less harsh, because we are no longer constantly measuring where we stand on some scale of success or failure. Instead, we simply live, simply be, simply take part in each pulse of the flow. This awareness also changes our relationship with uncertainty. If in the past, the unknown was a source of anxiety and insecurity, now we begin to see it as an essential part of life, like the silence between musical notes that makes the melody complete. Without uncertainty, there would be no creativity, no discovery, no unexpected moment that makes us laugh or cry. Uncertainty, instead of a shadow, becomes a fertile ground where all possibilities quietly germinate. When we open ourselves to it, we are no longer compelled to know it all or foresee it all, but can walk lightly, like a traveler savoring each curve in an unfamiliar road. From here, a natural letting go appears, not resignation, but a deep trust in the wisdom of the flow. We still give our best, but no longer grip tightly to outcomes. If what we hope for arrives, we receive it with gratitude. If it does not, we still feel whole, knowing that everything comes at its own right time and in its own way. This attitude frees us from countless disappointments and resentments that come from trying to control what lies beyond our reach. It also releases new energy, because we are no longer draining ourselves in futile struggles against reality. That letting go leads to an even deeper freedom, the freedom from the fear of loss. Knowing that everything is temporary and never truly ours in an absolute sense. We cherish things while they are here, but are ready to let them go when the time comes. A relationship, a job, a season of life, all have their own lifespan. Clinging only brings pain when that lifespan ends, while releasing allows us to move forward without dragging the threads of the past. This does not lessen love or attachment, rather, it purifies it, because it is no longer bound by the fear of losing. When no longer bound by fear or expectation, we begin to experience a different kind of happiness, an unconditional happiness. It needs no special reason, no dependence on success, possessions, or recognition. It may arise when we sit quietly watching the rain, when we stroll slowly along a street covered in golden leaves, or when we hear someone's laughter from a corner of a small cafe. This kind of happiness is far more resilient, because it is not shaken by life's inevitable changes. Even when circumstances shift, even on days when gray clouds cover the sky, the small flame of happiness still glows inside, keeping the heart warm. This state also changes the very nature of the relationships around us. When we no longer seek to be filled or to affirm our worth through others, we step into relationships with greater freedom and generosity. We can love without demanding, listen without rushing to fix, be present without imposing. Others can feel this, and it gives them the safety to be themselves as well. From here, bonds grow deeper, not because of promises or obligations, but because of a shared harmony in how both choose to simply exist together in the moment. At the same time, we realize that tending to inner stillness is not just an act for ourselves, but a gift to others. A calm mind can be a safe harbor for those who are adrift, like a quiet port welcoming a boat after days of storms. When we enter a room with steady energy, people sense it even before we speak. This does not come from trying to appear calm, but from truly living in that state, like the natural fragrance that radiates from a blooming flower. Looking deeper, we see that such calmness also helps us stand firm in the face of the world's great changes. In an age of constant movement, with news arriving in waves and events capable of shaking even the most solid plans, the one whose mind remains as still as a lake is not indifferent or numb, but able to respond without being swept away. They can act wisely amid chaos, making decisions from clarity rather than panic. This steadiness not only anchors themselves but also radiates stability to those around them. Ultimately, all of this leads us to a simple yet profound realization. Living mindfully is not about withdrawing from life, but about stepping into it with open eyes and a soft heart. We do not avoid the highs and lows, nor try to hold on only to the bright side of experience. We receive both light and shadow as inseparable faces of the same coin. When we can see everything as part of a greater whole, nothing is entirely threatening or entirely to be avoided, for all of it is material for us to keep learning, growing, and loving. As we move into the next part of the journey, we begin to recognize that every practice, every story, every experience we have lived is like a seed planted deep within the garden of our consciousness. Some seeds sprout immediately, growing into new insights that change how we see and live. Others rest quietly beneath the soil for years, only pushing through when the conditions are right, reminding us that no effort to nurture the soul is ever wasted. This process teaches us that spiritual growth is never a straight line, but a series of widening circles, each return to a familiar point revealing it as deeper, richer, and more meaningful than before. From this recognition, a new patience is born. We no longer demand quick results or pressure ourselves to change immediately or become better according to someone else's standards. We allow ourselves and those around us the time to mature at our own pace. This is not procrastination or resignation, but trust that every process has its season. You cannot harvest before the flowers fade. And you cannot force spring to arrive before its time. Within this patience, we come to cherish the value of each small step and each simple, consistent act, like spending a few minutes in quiet breathing each morning, reading a nourishing page each night, or occasionally gazing at the sky to remind ourselves of the vastness we belong to. As patience deepens, we become gentler with mistakes. If before, each stumble meant self-blame and harsh judgment, now we can look back with kindness, seeing it as a natural part of learning. A child cannot learn to walk without falling, and the soul cannot grow without trials, errors, and adjustments. This attitude frees us from the pressure of perfection, opening the way for a new kind of courage, the courage to try the unknown, to step out of the comfort zone, to live true to ourselves even before anyone else understands. That courage gradually becomes a quiet, natural quality, needing no noise, no proof, but evident in the way we choose to live. We are no longer pulled along by the crowd for fear of being left behind. Nor do we strain ourselves to meet expectations just to gain acceptance. Every choice comes from a still place within, where we know clearly what fits us and what does not. Even when that path sets us apart or leaves us alone, we remain at ease, knowing we cannot trade our truth for temporary comfort. From here, our core values become clearer. We know what we want in a relationship, what matters in work, where our boundaries must be kept, and where we can be flexible. This clarity keeps us from getting lost at life's unexpected crossroads, because every decision is lit by the lamp of our own heart, not the noise outside. It also makes our words and actions more consistent, creating lasting trust with those around us. At the same time, we begin to see an important truth. The deepest lessons often do not come from smooth moments, but from challenges. When everything goes our way, we may be comfortable but rarely have to dig into the core of who we are. Only in facing loss, conflict, or sudden change are we compelled to look inward and find a stronger foundation to stand upon. Looking back, we feel grateful even for moments that seemed like setbacks, because they forged our endurance, compassion, and humility. From that gratitude, a new door opens, the ability to find meaning even in what once seemed meaningless. When something does not unfold as hoped, instead of quickly labeling it as bad luck or a mistake, we can ask, "What is the lesson here?" Or, "How is this inviting me to change?" The answer may not come immediately, but the question keeps the mind open, allowing the wisdom of time and experience to gradually reveal it. Living this way, we become better companions to ourselves. Instead of piling on pressure, we know how to encourage when needed, comfort when tired, and remind ourselves of what matters most when distracted. This self-companionship becomes the foundation for all other relationships. Because when we can be kindly present for ourselves, we can just as easily be there for others, without imposing or possessing. We can listen without interrupting, support without making them dependent, love without needing anything in return. At this point, we realize a larger circle in the journey. every effort to seek happiness, peace, and meaning ultimately leads us back to where it all began, our inner self. But this return is entirely different from the first, for we now carry with us the experiences, the scars, the joys, and the sorrows that have shaped us into a new version of ourselves. The inner self is no longer an untouched wilderness, but a cultivated garden with clear paths, quiet corners for rest, and open plots of soil ready to welcome new seeds. When the inner self becomes such a carefully tended garden, we begin to notice something curious yet natural. The things that once obsessed us, the goals we once considered of utmost importance, gradually become lighter, not because we have lost interest or ambition, but because we have come to understand that the true value of an experience is not in how it appears to others, but in how it has nourished, transformed, and expanded us. This understanding makes every choice freer. We no longer chase things to prove ourselves, but choose what aligns with the rhythm of the soul. A job, a place to live, a relationship, all are considered not only by what they give me, but also by who they help me become, and how they affect those around me. From this perspective, we begin to sense more clearly the flow of giving and receiving. If in the past, giving sometimes came with subtle expectations, a thank you, acknowledgement, or at least the satisfaction of doing the right thing, now we realize that unconditional giving is a pure form of freedom. When an action comes from a place of inner fullness, we no longer feel diminished by offering it, for the act itself is the reward. The recipient may or may not respond, may or may not understand, but that no longer affects our joy. This generosity, when nurtured over time, becomes a natural part of our presence, making others feel safe to open up and give in return. In this process, we also become more aware of our limits. In the past, in the desire to be good or helpful, we might have said yes to every request, sacrificing our time, energy, and even health to help. But through many experiences, we understand that protecting personal boundaries is not just for our own sake, but to ensure that what we give retains its quality and sincerity. A burnt-out person cannot care for others. A lamp close to burning out cannot light the way. Thus, we learn to say no when needed, not out of selfishness, but so that every yes comes from a place of fullness and willingness. From knowing how to hold boundaries, we open a new form of connection with the world, one not based on dependency, but on the freedom to choose. When we no longer cling to the role of rescuer or endurer, we meet others as equals, exchanging and learning together. This frees relationships from hidden pressures, allowing affection to grow more authentically. In such a space, each person can keep their own essence while still finding resonance with the other. At the same time, inner steadiness gives us deeper insight into the nature of conflict and disagreement. If in the past, every debate might have triggered a defensive stance, seeking to protect our view or convince the other to change, now we begin to see the value in listening to understand rather than to counter. When we truly listen, we discover that behind every opinion, every action, no matter how difficult to accept on the surface, there is often a need, a fear, or a deeply human longing. Seeing this humanity softens us. We no longer see others as opponents, but as fellow beings seeking safety, meaning, and happiness in their own way. This change does not strip us of the strength to stand for our views. On the contrary, it makes our voice more grounded, for it rests on understanding rather than reactivity. Words spoken from calmness and empathy often reach deeper than those driven by anger or prejudice. Sometimes we even see that the goal is not to win the argument, but to create a safe space where both sides can explore solutions together. Living in this spirit, we begin to experience a form of peace that was hard to reach before. It is not the peace that comes when everything is smooth, but the peace that remains present even in turbulence. It is like the stance of a rower accustomed to the waves, no longer trying to stop them, but learning to feel and move with their rhythm. This peace is not passive, it carries a steady strength, helping us remain upright even as the world shifts quickly around us. More deeply still, we begin to feel a gentle merging with life itself. Everything, big or small, becomes part of a shared flow. There is no longer a gap between truly living and practicing. For every moment can be practice, and every practice happens in life itself. Washing a dish, walking down the street, speaking with a stranger, all are opportunities to be present, to observe, to live fully. This merging reveals that the path and the destination are in fact one. And what matters is not how far we go, but how we walk with each step. When awareness expands to the point where every breath and every step becomes part of the practice of living, we begin to see more clearly how everything in our life is interconnected, like invisible threads weaving a vast tapestry. Every encounter, brief or long, leaves a mark, a color of its own. Some are as light as a morning breeze, passing quickly but refreshing the soul. Others are deep like a summer rain, making us pause and reflect on ourselves. These pieces, when placed side by side, no longer carry the labels of good or bad we once assigned, but become essential parts of the complete picture of life. From this vantage point, we learn to accept that some things cannot be explained right away. What happens today may only be understood years later, or perhaps never fully explained at all. In the past, such ambiguity might have made us uneasy, urging us to grasp, to control, to force it into the story we tell about our life. Now we know that these empty spaces are the fertile ground for imagination, for creativity, and for growth. Just as the most beautiful ink paintings leave areas of untouched white, life too needs unfilled spaces for breathing, for dreaming, for quiet. This state of mind gradually allows us to let go of the need to measure the value of every experience. No longer needing to ask, "What will this bring me?" or "Is it worth my time and effort?" We can live a moment simply because it is here, without any reason. An afternoon spent sitting under a tree, listening to the rustle of leaves, becomes a complete act in itself, not a means to reach anything else. When we stop turning everything into a tool for a goal, we discover a new kind of freedom, the freedom to be present. In that presence, our energy becomes purer. Others can feel it not through words, but through the stillness in our eyes, the unhurried quality of our movements, or the sense of safety they feel when near us. We realize that we no longer need to try to make an impression, because genuine presence is already a gift. Even without offering advice, without doing anything special, simply sitting and listening, we can still create a shift in the other person's state of mind. Living with such energy also changes how we receive difficulties. Events still occur, loss, conflict, failure, but they no longer strike us down like storms. We still feel pain, still have moments of uncertainty. But on a deeper level, there is a part of us that remains unmoved, watching everything unfold as if observing a wave crash upon the shore and recede. This unmoved part is neither cold nor indifferent, but like a tree whose roots reach deep into the earth, knowing that storms are simply part of the natural cycle. From the perspective of that tree, we can open our hearts to both the joys and sorrows of others. When someone shares happiness, we can rejoice with them without envy or comparison. When they suffer, we can remain present without being dragged under, holding enough clarity to be both compassionate and supportive. This is a kind of love that does not cling, does not bind, and does not run dry. For it comes not from a desire to control, but from the awareness that every soul is on its own unique journey. As we continue living in this way, we begin to see that what once seemed like the ultimate goals, success, recognition, certainty, are now only small parts of a larger picture. More important is how we move through each stage, how we preserve our inner qualities amidst change, and how we leave gentle yet steady footprints on the paths of others. We understand that some influences cannot be measured in numbers, yet their impact can ripple through time, a well-timed word of comfort, a small act of kindness expecting nothing in return, or simply a steady presence. All can become guiding lights for someone at an unexpected moment. Perhaps the deepest transformation is realizing that there is no longer a clear boundary between learning and living. Each day is a classroom. Each person we meet is a teacher. Each situation is a subtle test of whether we are truly living in alignment with what we believe. Even in moments when we forget to practice, when we are swept into the rush of life or react from old habits, the very act of noticing that is itself part of the lesson. This releases us from the pressure to be perfect and helps us see every experience, including our stumbles, as an opportunity to return. When layers of self-perception have been cleansed of old illusions, we begin to step into a state where each moment becomes as clear as an unruffled lake. Each morning, without the compulsion to immediately plunge into a long list of tasks to prove our worth, we can pause, take a deep breath, and recognize that we are still alive, still given the chance to experience another day. This feeling is not laziness or resignation, but a beginning from a point of stillness, a firm ground from which every action flows from awareness rather than reaction. In this state, time is no longer fragmented into racing hours, but becomes a continuous stream where each moment is a doorway into full living. In living with such a flow, we gradually realize a simple truth often forgotten. Most of life's pressure does not come from the event itself, but from the stories we tell ourselves about it. A passing remark from someone can become a wound lasting years if we replay and interpret it negatively. Conversely, the same remark can vanish like wind if we let it pass without clinging. The difference lies in the ability to observe without identifying, to listen without necessarily believing every whisper of the mind. This is not the denial of feelings, but the recognition that emotions are only part of the experience, not the whole truth. With a healthy distance between ourselves and the mind's stories, a new kind of freedom appears, the freedom to choose our response instead of reacting automatically. We are no longer drawn into endless arguments just to prove we are right. Nor are we quick to change others to fit our expectations. Instead, we focus on what we can control: the quality of our presence, the clarity of our words, and the integrity of our actions. From here, we understand more deeply that true strength does not lie in imposing, but in holding to our values even as the world shifts around us. This steadiness changes the nature of relationships. When we no longer use affection as a tool for validation or comfort, we approach others from a place of fullness rather than lack. This makes connection clearer, unclouded by hidden demands. We can love without fearing loss, give without waiting, be with someone without needing control. In such moments, love is no longer a fleeting emotion, but a state of being, like sunlight that spreads without asking who deserves its warmth. When love transcends the boundaries of the personal to become a living quality, we begin to feel more vividly our connection with everything around us. The song of morning birds is no longer meaningless background noise, but part of a symphony moving in rhythm with our breath. The scent of damp earth after rain is not just a sign of weather, but a reminder of life quietly renewing everywhere. Even the noisy sounds of the city become part of a larger picture, where everything has its place. This merging is not dissolving the self into the world, but living in the world with the awareness that we and the world are not separate. From this awareness, gratitude begins to seep into every ordinary action. A cool glass of water, a simple meal, a warm conversation, all become opportunities to pause and acknowledge. Interestingly, when gratitude becomes a habit, the things we once took for granted begin to glow in an unfamiliar way. We realize that we have lived among small miracles without noticing, because our minds were too busy chasing after greater things. Now, instead of endlessly seeking more, we learn to cherish deeply what is already here, and that, in itself, makes us richer than any material accumulation could. This wealth does not come from the outside, and so it cannot be taken away by any external upheaval. Even when everything around us changes, our work, our home, our companions, we still have an inner source of strength to return to. This source is not a fortress in which we lock ourselves away from life, but an open house, ready to receive both sunshine and rain. Living this way, we no longer fear impermanence. Because impermanence is no longer an enemy, it is the flow that keeps everything fresh, ever capable of transformation. From here, the journey is no longer a tense effort to arrive somewhere, but becomes a continuous dance between doing and letting go, between going and staying, between speaking and listening. Each step is a lesson, each breath an opportunity, and each day a new chapter in a book that we are both writing and reading. This is the moment we realize that the ultimate purpose is not to reach the destination, but to learn how to be fully present along the way, so that when we look back, each footprint holds a story worth telling with gratitude and peace. When our inner journey has taken us through enough seasons of emotional sunshine and rain, we begin to see clearly that the soul's maturity does not come from moments of glory or dazzling victories, but is mostly forged in quiet, even uneventful times when nothing in particular is happening. It is precisely those nothing much days that allow the seeds of awareness to quietly take root and grow. Like an old tree that does not grow only when watered or fertilized, but also through long hours of standing still in light and gentle wind. Our hearts, too, need that space to gather strength. In the stillness of daily life, we learn how to befriend ourselves, realizing that the deepest companionship is not with another person, but with ourselves in every state, whether joyful or weary, full of energy or reluctant to move. From this familiarity with ourselves, we begin to notice the subtlest movements in life that we once overlooked. The sparkle in a passerby's eyes, the faint sigh of someone sitting nearby, or the shift in the air's scent signaling a new season. Each becomes a small but meaningful message. In paying attention, life stops feeling like a list of tasks to complete and becomes more like a piece of music with countless notes, each carrying its own shade of feeling. This ability to listen and sense is not to cling or overanalyze, but to live in harmony with what is unfolding, like a musician who knows when to let a note linger and when to let it rest. Living in such harmony also changes how we relate to challenges. Instead of seeing difficulties as enemies to defeat or obstacles to remove at once, we begin to view them as stern yet devoted teachers. Each event brings a lesson, sometimes about limits, sometimes about patience, sometimes about letting go of the image we once thought was ourselves. The more we engage with these teachers, the more we see they are not here to harm, but to illuminate the corners we have avoided facing. And so, rather than resisting, we learn to ask, "What is this teaching me?" A question that opens far more possibilities than it closes. Along the way, humility becomes a natural part of our mind. We understand we are neither the center of the universe nor the holders of all answers. This humility does not make us small or silent, on the contrary. It allows us to speak from a steadier, clearer place. We can express our views without imposing, share our understanding without needing praise, and remain willing to listen even when what we hear conflicts with our own beliefs, because we know every perspective is but one fragment, and the bigger picture will always need many fragments to be whole. That humility opens a new space for gratitude and respect for the simplest things. We start to value more the efforts of those we once overlooked, the farmer growing the rice, the street cleaner keeping the roads clear, or the driver taking us along long routes. Every person we meet is part of a vast network sustaining this life. And seeing this makes us naturally want to contribute our part in the most positive way we can. This is not pressure to make a difference, but the joy of knowing that each kind action, however small, can strengthen some link in that network. As this joy deepens, we gradually lose the need to leave a mark in any showy way. We understand that the greatest impact is not always what can be seen immediately, but sometimes a seed lying dormant for years before sprouting. This makes us more patient, less rushed for results, less likely to measure our worth by how many people know or praise us. Instead, we focus on doing our best with what is in our hands, so that when we leave a place, the soil beneath our footsteps is more fertile than before. With this mindset, fear about the future diminishes greatly. We still plan, still prepare, but no longer obsess over everything going exactly as imagined. We see that the nature of life is constant change, and change is not necessarily loss. Sometimes it is an invitation to step into a new chapter. Thus, when one door closes, we do not try to break it open again, but grow curious about where another door might be ajar. This flexibility not only helps us adapt, but allows us to enjoy the journey with all its unexpected wonders. Finally, we understand that everything we have learned, from presence, letting go, humility, gratitude, to flexibility, are not separate skills, but different expressions of the same state, the state of awakened living. In awakening, we are no longer bound by past or future, no longer wearing masks for acceptance, no longer feeling lost in our own lives. Instead, we live as a natural part of the universe, contributing our own melody to the great symphony without needing it to overshadow any other. In that music, sometimes we are a high note, sometimes a low note, but in every moment, we still belong to the song. When understanding has become a natural part of life's rhythm, we begin to see that the things which once kept us preoccupied, fighting, or afraid now appear like small ripples across the surface of a vast lake. It is not that the world around us has completely changed, but that the way we stand within it has shifted. In the past, each disturbance was like a strong wind rocking the small boat of our being. Now, we have learned how to widen that boat so that the wind is no longer a threat, but a force to help us move forward. The change lies not in eliminating the waves, but in learning to use the wind to fill our sails, and the rhythm of the waves to guide our direction. This is when we realize that challenges are not necessarily obstacles, but material for cultivating the mind's skillfulness and steadiness. As we go deeper into this experience, we understand that true strength does not lie in mastering everything, but in being able to walk alongside what we cannot control. Life will always hold surprises, sometimes joy, sometimes loss, but in either case, we can still maintain a certain inner softness. This softness is not weakness, but the flexibility of bamboo, able to bend before the wind without breaking, able to accept new shapes without losing its essence. From here, we learn that resisting the current only exhausts us, while moving with it can open directions we had never imagined. What's interesting is that as the mind becomes calmer, we begin to see beneath the surface of events, to notice the invisible threads connecting all experiences. A chance encounter on the street can lead to a deep friendship. A failure that seemed to end all hope can become the springboard for a turning point. Observing in this way, we are no longer in a hurry to label each event as good or bad, but are patient enough to see how the story will unfold. This patience frees us from the pressure of having to know immediately where things are heading, allowing us instead to live in an open state, ready to receive whatever appears. Freed from the pull of hasty judgments, the mind becomes clearer in choosing what is truly worthy of our time and energy. Pointless arguments, needless comparisons, or imagined worries gradually lose their grip. We begin to say no to what does not serve our peace and growth, not out of avoidance, but out of respect for life itself. When we no longer waste energy on entanglements, we have more space to nurture what truly matters: genuine relationships, meaningful work, and moments of living fully without embellishment. This clarity also transforms the way we approach relationships. Rather than seeking someone to fill an emptiness within, we enter each connection from a state of fullness. When two people meet from such fullness, their bond is not dependency, but resonance. They do not try to pull each other in one direction, but walk side by side, each keeping their own identity while harmonizing with a shared rhythm. This is the kind of connection in which, when one departs, we do not feel a loss of self, for we understand that both have given what was needed, and the paths they continue will still carry the imprints of the journey shared. Living in this resonance also opens the possibility of deep empathy for those entirely different from ourselves. We can look at someone who is angry, anxious, or fearful without rushing to judge, knowing that such emotions have also lived within us at some point. This empathy does not mean condoning every action, but it allows us to respond with compassion rather than defensiveness. In this way, even difficult conversations become opportunities to understand each other, rather than battlegrounds to prove who is right or wrong. At a deeper level, we see that compassion must extend not only to others, but to ourselves. For years, we may have lived in harshness toward ourselves, always demanding we do better, faster, stronger. Now we understand that kindness toward ourselves does not make us weaker, but is the foundation for standing steady through all challenges. Only when we can forgive ourselves do we truly have the capacity to forgive others. Only when we can love ourselves in our moments of weakness can we love others without conditions. All of this comes together as a new kind of freedom, a freedom not defined by circumstances, not bound by an image we must uphold, and not limited by what others think. This freedom is not an escape from life, but the ability to live in it with an open heart and a clear mind. In such freedom, each day is a gift, not because it is free from difficulty, but because we know that even within difficulty, we can still find threads of understanding, love, and connection. There comes a stage in the inner journey when we begin to look back on past years, no longer with self-judgment or regret, but as if rereading a book that once moved us deeply, turning the pages again now to notice details we had previously missed. Memories that once made the heart tighten now feel like a light breeze carrying the taste of learning and growth. We see that old pains have not vanished, but have changed shape, from open wounds into gentle scars, reminding us of the power of healing. Because of this, we no longer fear intense emotions, knowing that all will eventually become part of our treasury of experience, adding depth to how we see the world. This shift also makes us more aware of our relationship with time. In the past, time might have felt like an enemy, an ever-present pressure urging us to go faster, achieve more, prove our worth before it's too late. Now, we begin to see time as a patient companion, always there to remind us that everything has its own rhythm. A tree cannot bloom before its roots are strong. A heart cannot open before it has been nourished long enough. Understanding this rhythm, we stop pushing ourselves and others, trusting instead that each stage exists for a reason, and that blooming in season has a beauty far more enduring than any forced result. From this understanding, we begin to treasure each present moment, even when it holds nothing special. An ordinary afternoon can be precious simply because the sunlight falls through the window in a unique way, or because the scent of hot tea fills a quiet room. A brief conversation with a stranger on the street can leave a warm echo in our hearts for days. When the mind has been trained to recognize the value of small things, we no longer wait for grand events to feel life is worth living, for each day can hold its own completeness, as long as we are awake enough to see it. In this space, gratitude becomes a natural habit, requiring no effort to maintain. We feel grateful not only for what goes our way, but also for what does not, for both have shaped the person we are today. This gratitude is not a layer of false optimism, but the result of seeing the hidden web of connection between all experiences. Rejection has taught us patience. Loss has taught us appreciation, failure has taught us how to rise again. Looking back, we realize that if even one of these pieces were missing, the picture of our life would no longer be as complete as it is now. From this gratitude, we develop a deep respect for limits, both our own and those of others. In the past, we may have seen limits as barriers to be broken, but now we see them as protective fences, giving everything time to grow without being disrupted too soon. Accepting limits does not mean ceasing to grow. It means knowing the right moment and way to step out of our comfort zone. Sometimes, courage is not in rushing headlong into a challenge, but in pausing long enough to prepare fully before moving forward. With this perspective, we also become gentler in how we support others. Instead of being impatient for them to change in ways we think best, we learn to walk alongside them, respecting their unique process. We understand that each person has their own season, and sometimes the best thing we can do is create a safe space where they can explore freely without fear of judgment. This is a quiet yet enduring kind of support, like the way the earth silently holds a seed until it is ready to reach for the light. This patience not only deepens relationships, but also helps us live more harmoniously with life's constant changes. When one door closes, instead of panicking or forcing it open again at all costs, we can calmly wait to see which other door will open. This trust is not based on luck, but on the lived experience of having seen many losses lead to unforeseen opportunities. Such an attitude transforms uncertainty from a source of anxiety into a journey of discovery, where every step brings something to learn. Ultimately, all these insights merge into a sense of freedom quite different from what we once thought freedom meant. It is not the ability to do whatever we want whenever we wish, but the ability to remain steady and clear regardless of circumstances. This freedom does not depend on removing hardship, but on knowing how to live within hardship without losing our essence. Once we have touched this state, we can smile even on gray days, knowing the sky will clear again. And that even when the rain still falls, our hearts can be as warm as the morning sun. There are moments on the path of awakening when we realize we no longer seek answers outside ourselves. For the inner silence has become the most trustworthy teacher. In the past, when facing a crossroads, we might have rushed to ask others for advice, searched through books, or looked for signs from the world to confirm our choice. Now we understand that all those sources can help only to a certain point. The real answer must be found in the quiet depths of our own being. When we dare to sit still long enough to listen, we begin to tell apart the voice of fear, the call of intuition, and the fleeting whispers of illusion. This discernment does not come from analytical reasoning, but from a sense of clarity and lightness, like a door quietly opening within the heart. By learning to trust the silence within, we also realize that life is no longer a series of problems to be solved, but a flow to be moved with. Plans, goals, and dreams may still be present, but they no longer hold absolute power over the mind. We can work diligently and wholeheartedly on what we do, yet be ready to let go if the current carries us in another direction. This is not passive resignation, but a balance between action and acceptance, between initiative and surrender. Like a skilled rower combining the strength of their arms with the direction of the wind to go further without exhausting themselves. Living in this balance brings us closer to the truth of impermanence. Not only in moments of great loss, but even in the smallest details, we can see constant change. A flower in the morning may already be different by afternoon. The joy we felt yesterday may have softened into a quiet sadness today. When we truly see impermanence, we stop clinging to what is beautiful and stop avoiding what is uncomfortable. Knowing both will pass, this acceptance lightens the heart, freeing it from the illusion that we can control or preserve any state forever. Paradoxically, when we no longer obsess over holding on to what is good, we can enjoy it more deeply when it comes. A beautiful morning is no longer just a scene to look at, but a full-bodied experience. The warmth of sunlight on the skin, the sound of birds in the open air, the damp scent of earth after the night's rain. We do not think, "How can I make this moment last?" We simply live in it, letting it seep into each breath, each heartbeat. Likewise, when facing hard times, we no longer feel the urgency to push them away, but can sit with them, breathe with them, and let them dissolve in their own time. This full presence also changes the way we love. Love is no longer driven by the need to possess or the expectation of return, but becomes a natural state of the heart when it has been nourished into fullness. We love because it is our nature, not from fear of loss, nor as a condition for existence. In this way of loving, separation cannot take love away, because it is not bound to the form or presence of one specific person. It is like the light of a candle, able to ignite many others without diminishing itself, even when no longer in the same room. From the foundation of such a heart, kindness becomes inseparable from daily life. We are not kind to be acknowledged, nor because we feel we should be, but because it is the natural response to the connection we feel with all beings. A smile for a stranger, a small act of help, a gentle word, all become ordinary expressions, free of calculation. This not only nourishes those who receive, but also strengthens the peace within us. For each such act is like watering the roots of our own being. Of course, living this way does not mean we will be spared from every challenge or hurt. There will still be moments when we are misunderstood, betrayed, or rejected, but instead of seeing these as proof that the world is harsh, we can view them as essential parts of the bigger picture. Each time it happens, we have the chance to return to the quiet within ourselves, to reaffirm our beliefs, and to deepen our ability to remain steady no matter the circumstances. Like a great tree in the middle of a storm, the trunk may sway, the leaves may fall, but the roots still cling firmly to the earth. Gradually, we begin to realize that this journey does not lead to a fixed destination, but rather to a continual expansion of awareness and compassion. Every day, every experience, every encounter can become a doorway into deeper understanding. There is no longer the concept of arriving or completing, because each time we think we have fully understood, a new layer reveals itself. This does not exhaust us, on the contrary. It brings a constant sense of freshness, as if we are traveling through an infinite universe of consciousness. In the end, we discover that everything we have been searching for, peace, freedom, love, has never truly been out of reach. They have always been here, in this very moment, waiting only for us to be still enough to recognize them and brave enough to live fully with them. We do not need to wait until every condition is perfect, nor do we need to search for an ideal place, because the true home of the soul has always been within each breath, each step, each glance. Once we realize this, the journey stops being a race and becomes a gentle melody. where every note is worth listening to, and every pause is full of meaning. When we come to the end of a long journey, we often think the thing to do is to sum it all up, draw lessons, and find a new direction. But with the journey of awakening, the deeper we go, the more we see that nothing truly ends or begins in the usual sense. Every experience, whether small or grand, is simply part of a continuous flow, where each moment is both the result of what has passed and the seed of what is yet to come. This awareness frees us from the fear of losing our way, because even when we do not know exactly where we are going, each step still takes us closer to our truest self. When the mind is no longer obsessed with a final goal, it becomes lighter, more flexible, and open to all possibilities. This state is like sitting by a river, no longer wishing for it to flow faster or slower, but simply watching each ripple pass by. Sometimes the water carries golden leaves glittering in the afternoon sun, other times it carries twigs or scraps of debris. Both are part of the same river, neither making it less beautiful nor more perfect. When we live like that river, we accept even the unwanted aspects of life without rushing to get rid of them, because we understand that they too enrich the whole picture. This acceptance is not compromise, but wisdom, born from seeing that we cannot love only half of life and reject the other half while still expecting to find peace. From here, we begin to change the way we see the upheavals in life. In the past, whenever there was a major change, we might have reacted as if it were a crisis that needed to be fixed right away. Now, we can pause, breathe, and observe what is truly happening within ourselves. Not to delay action, but to ensure that every action arises from clarity instead of panic. This pause is like the silence between two notes in music. Without it, the song would lose its depth. In the same way, it is these unhurried moments that let us see the true nature of things more clearly. The interesting thing is that when we can stop and observe in this way, we realize that many problems that once kept us up at night are not as serious as we imagined. They are like thick clouds that initially block the sky. But the wind will pass, the clouds will dissolve, and the sky will still be there, vast and unbroken. When we know that sky is always present, we no longer let ourselves be carried away by each passing rainstorm or brief thunder. This does not mean we become indifferent, but that we have learned to keep our hearts open even when the sky temporarily darkens. Because of this, our peace no longer depends so heavily on external circumstances. A day may still bring bad news, still have unpleasant events, but they no longer have the power to define the entire day. We learn to find moments of warmth in the middle of the storm, like a cup of hot tea on a rainy day, or a tight embrace in a time of worry. These moments do not erase the difficulties, but they are enough to remind us that there is always something worth cherishing, even in the most challenging times. When we live with this awareness, we also become freer from our own personal story. In the past, we may have clung too tightly to a certain image or role, the strong one, the kind one, the successful one, and felt uneasy if we had to step away from it. Now, we know that we are larger than any label. We can change, we can try new things, we can fail, and none of that reduces our core worth. This freedom creates space for creativity, for joy, and for genuine connections, because we are no longer bound by the need to maintain a perfect self in the eyes of others. Once we stop trying to protect an image, we also find it easier to accept when others change. Instead of clinging to the expectation that they must always remain as we have known them, we give them the space to grow, to walk their own path, even if that path is far from what we once imagined. Relationships then become companionship, not control. Sometimes, companionship means walking side by side, other times, it means wishing each other well on separate roads. But in both cases, the affection remains, because it is built on respect and understanding rather than possession. All of this comes together into a deep understanding that happiness is not a destination we will reach if we follow the right path, but a way of living that can be practiced right here and now. Every time we pause to feel our breath, to smile at someone, to listen to the wind in the trees, that is when we are living in happiness. It is not loud, it does not need to be shown off, but it is steady and nourishing to every cell of the soul. When we realize that the present moment is always complete, there is nothing to wait for before living fully. If you have listened this far, perhaps somewhere along this journey, a story, an image, or an idea has touched you, not loudly, not showily, but gently, like moonlight falling on the surface of a lake, leaving a small ripple in your mind. These past hours have not only been Zen stories or the teachings of the ancients, but also a mirror in which you can see yourself in each moment. When you know how to let go, when you dare to be present, when you see impermanence clearly without fear, each is a doorway into a peaceful sky that you have always carried within yourself. Out there, life may still be noisy and full of challenges, but you already know you have a place to return to, not somewhere far away, but right within each breath, each step, each moment you are truly present. Whenever the world leaves you feeling weary, remember that the path back to stillness has never disappeared. It only waits for you to walk it once again. There, you do not need to become anyone else. You do not need to strain yourself to meet any standard, you only need to be yourself. Whole and complete. If you wish to continue nurturing this quiet space, if you want to journey deeper into the stories, lessons, and moments that touch the deepest layers of the soul, stay with us. Subscribe to the Silent Soul Garden channel and turn on notifications, so that whenever a new story blossoms, you will be the first to step into that garden. Each subscription is not just a number, it is a promise to meet again. A shared commitment to keep the flame of awakening alive in the midst of life's constant changes. Thank you for being here throughout this long journey. May you have a deep, restful sleep, a light and gentle morning, and a heart that always knows the way home, even when your eyes are still open. I will see you again in the next story, where the words will keep whispering to remind you that you have never truly been lost.